caught a couple episodes of the podcast. I think you're doing a cool thing. Obviously, I'm a music fan like you are, and we've seen many a show and spent maybe a little too much money on music over the years to
Oh yeah.
further our catalog, I think. Um, but yeah, you gotta love music. It's an equalizer. It's a mediator. It saves a lot of tough discussions with people. It makes discussions better. You know, I can't imagine a world without it. I certainly wouldn't live in a world without music. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to talk about it. Yeah, let's do it, man.
Uh, Actually, you're jumping into one of my points, but we'll cover that in a second. I just kind of want to cycle through, what I have here. I know that, or at least from when you and I met, you've always seemed to be somebody who was more connected to the music that existed before we were born versus modern stuff. So explain, if you can, what drew you to the classic stuff versus what we grew up with, because I'm wondering who influenced the type of music you listen to, the type of music you play, um, you know what personal influences have influenced it, and what music has influenced what you listen to.
Yeah, so a lot of it's kind of all tied in together. My parents and my uncle, all my uncles, my parents were big music fans. My uncle Mike was a guitar player, and some of my early memories of him coming over to visit and always bringing his acoustic guitar over and playing songs, and they just kind of stuck. Um, and they were always big rock and roll fans. A lot of classic rock was their era, and that was the stuff they listened to. And some of my favorite and earliest memories are of my dad and my uncle and uncles listening to music and hanging out in the backyard or just sitting in the house and singing along. Um, so that influenced a lot of music for me. A lot of music for me is nostalgia, um, but it's stuff that I still listen to and enjoy, whether it's from a fond memory or not. So for me, a lot of it and a lot of the things I listen to today are guitar music, guitar riff based music generally, and that was obviously big in the '60s with the British invasion and everything else. So I just loved it. The Beatles were huge for me at the time. I listened to them as a kid. I still do to this day. Some of my favorite songs to play on the guitar are Beatles songs because they're fun to sing along, and they're fun to play. So the Beatles were big. A lot of the British bands, The Who. I'm a huge fan of The Who. Quadrophenia. That's one of my favorite albums of all time. I just listened to that front to back like a week ago.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm a big fan of The Who. The Stones. Obviously Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. I got my Roger Waters Animal shirt on today. Got that one in concert. Um, so I just been a big fan of it. It's always something about it stuck with me. I like the flow and the meaning behind it. In the music, it's as much as I can appreciate music we grew up with, and some of it I got into a bit later in life. A lot of the Seattle sound and the alternative music, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains. Um, I remember my father did have a copy of Super Unknown, the Soundgarden CD back in the
Yep.
day. That was one of those distinct memories I remember of the CD case in my living room as a kid.
Hmm.
Was that one? A lot of like Leonard Skinner, Black Sabbath, AC/DC. My father was a huge Pink Floyd fan. Um, Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. That was one I remember. I was quite young when he got that one, so that was a newer one for me at the time, and that was
Hmm.
like 1989. So there's something about it. The music always just felt right, and that's what I've always listened to. I do appreciate listening to music, and I love when I get to hear a new song or a new band or something I've never heard before because it doesn't happen to me very often. I just didn't always identify with modern music. Um, I don't go out of my way to find new music, but I love when I do. A couple of bands. Well, Wilco was a band that I was big into recently. And when I say recently, I'm talking like 8 years ago, something
Hmm.
like that. I stumbled across. Well, I heard the name a few times, and I I listened to the Music Cares is some sort of a music company, and they do tributes. They did a tribute to Neil Young. I'm a big Neil Young fan. It's one thing I didn't mention. Singer songwriters are always big for me. I was a big Creedence fan, John Fogerty and Bob Dylan and Paul Simon and Neil Young. And if you have in a car a guitar and you sing lyrics, I'm probably gonna like you. So Music Cares did a tribute to Neil Young, and one of the bands that played was Wilco, and they did a cover of an old Buffalo Springfield song called "Broken Arrow," which I always liked. It's just a unique and a cool and a fun song, and they nailed it. I mean, note for note, perfect. And I thought, who are these guys? And Jeff Tweedy's hair was all over the place, and they just seemed like such an interesting band. I kind of forgot about them for a bit until I came across a copy of, I think it was a Rolling Stones 100 Greatest Guitar Players edition. And Dallas Klein, who was a guitar player for Wilco, was on that list. And one of the signature songs he listed was a song called Impossible Germany, which is an odd name. But after seeing them do the Neil Young show and then coming across that, I looked into them and wow. I mean, to this day, Impossible Germany is one of my favorite songs of all time. And if you're not a Wilco fan or if you don't know them, I'd highly recommend checking them out. Well, like I say, there are bands I stumble across and I go all in, usually if it's a band I really like. But the classics have always stuck with me. And a lot of it goes back to my parents and my uncle and just having an appreciation for that music. It's nostalgia, but it's just good music.
Yeah. As far as, because you talked about, Music Cares, I believe, and that I think that actually ties into this series a little, because I think, as I'm sure I've told you, I started this series in honor of Chester Bennington and Linkin Park, and I believe that the band was very heavily involved with Music Cares, and you mentioned, uh, Wilco doing a tribute. I'm curious, and this is going to, draw me into uh, what actually got me interested. You're actually one of the ones that got me interested in Aerosmith, or at least heavily into Aerosmith. I mean, I listened to it, you know, randomly throughout growing up, but when you and I met, I think I listened to it more. Um, you talk about, a band doing a tribute to another band, but what is your opinion when somebody covers another band? More specifically, when a band seemingly covers themselves, and I mean, I'm talking about um, trying to, when supposedly Aerosmith was trying to revive their career, um, when they redid "Walk This Way" with Run DMC. Now, I've heard both versions. I personally, I think the song, regardless of the version I'm listening to, I do think the song is kind of overhyped. But I'm curious what you think when a band covers another band, and then I'm also curious what you think when a band covers themselves. I guess you would call it.
Yeah, I mean, for years I was against cover songs. I used to joke that if a band wants to cover another band, you have to call me first and make sure it's okay. And if I approve that it sounds good, then you can go ahead and do it. I was always kidding, but yeah. So I wasn't always a fan. I tend to like the originals, but there are some people do the song justice. I think
Mhm.
if the song really means something to you and you want to cover it, then sure. Or if you think you can maybe bring a new aspect to it, or you hear it in your head a different way, that's okay too. As much as I try not to be a music snob, and I probably have been most of my life, but I've lightened up a lot with styles of music, and I have a much greater appreciation for all things music as I get older. Even if it's not something I'm going to go out and buy or listen to, I can appreciate someone took the time to put themselves out there and to write lyrics into. As I play guitar and stuff, and I have for a long time. I'd like to think I should be much better at it than I am, given how long I've owned guitars.
Mhm.
Um, but I've never tried to write anything because I have such a high standard for music that I've never written anything that I liked, or I've written, a riff or a lyric here or there, and then this was, this was this song, or it sounds too much like a song I've already heard.
Yeah.
So I've never gone down that route, but I appreciate when people put themselves out there. There are some good cover songs. There's an old song by a band called Argent called
Mm-hmm.
God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and Kiss did a version of that song,
Yeah.
actually, that I thought was really cool. I'm not a huge Kiss fan, but it was, I think my uncle burnt me a Kiss CD back in the day with random stuff on it. That song was on it, and I thought it was very cool. Then I went back and heard the Argent version after, and it just seemed like it was lacking, and the Kiss version just seemed so much better. But there's other versions, like Elton John did a cover of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and I wasn't a fan. It didn't sound right to me. I think I may have this wrong, but I feel like David Bowie also may have covered that song, and I also wasn't super psyched about it. I just wasn't a fan. But anything against cover songs, but if you're gonna cover it, you got to make it special, or make it something different or unique. Again, I've lightened up a bit on it, and like I say, if you take the time to do something that shows your appreciation for a song or a band, I'm all for it. As far as the Aerosmith with the Run DMC, I didn't particularly like the version, but it had a big impact on music at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with a band trying to resurrect a career, or especially if you have producers or agents that are saying, "Hey, we've got this idea that we think will do well." There's a fine line between having music integrity and wanting to further yourself and your band and make a couple bucks while you're doing it. I mean, as much as it's nice to have the feeling and say you're doing it for the fans and for the appreciation of music, if you don't get paid for doing it, you can be doing it very long. So
Yeah.
the music video was unique. I like the music video more than I like the song, I think, of the Run DMC Aerosmith
Yeah.
collab.
Yeah.
And which reminds me, I forgot to mention Aerosmith when I was talking about the classic bands, because that was one of my father's and my uncle's favorite bands. Some of the earliest memories of my uncle playing guitar are old Aerosmith, the original Aerosmith album songs. One Way Street, Moving Out, and some of the lesser known songs that are really good. For me, the first 3 or 4 Aerosmith albums are some of the greatest American hard rock ever made. Um, in fact, I think you're probably familiar with That Metal Show and Eddie Trunk.
Oh, absolutely.
They did. I was watching that for a bit, and they did a countdown where they brought some people on and counted down the top 5, I think, best hard rock albums, not metal, but hard rock. And I think it's Van Halen on there, a UO album, some other stuff. But I believe they voted Aerosmith's Rocks as the #1. And for me, that's one of my top favorite albums of all time. Musically, um, it's just got that feel, and it's got that bit of nostalgia too, because, like I say, it brings back good memories of my uncle and my.
The other day I believe I was on Twitter, and somebody had tweeted out randomly, what is your favorite Aerosmith song? And the majority of people put Walk This Way. And me, having, had exposure to the bulk of their catalog, I put Dude Looks Like a Lady because it reminds me of Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire. And Robin Williams is my absolute favorite comic. So Dude Looks Like a Lady and Love in an Elevator. And I specifically put anybody who says that their favorite song is Walk This Way is fucking lying, because it is. I put that song is so overhyped that it's just trash.
I mean, there's a lot of songs, that the radio kills so many great songs, and even we're younger than. I mean, imagine people, our parents' age that have been hearing that song since 1976 or whatever year. That's a lot. There are some songs that, Freebird by Leonard Skinner is one of those songs that people say, "Oh, I can't hear it again." I personally still love the song, and to be able to record a song like that in the analog days before digital is amazing, and that outro is great. There's
Yeah.
parts, Stairway to Heaven, I can still listen to every once in a while. One that I don't think you'll like me saying is "Sweet Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses. I will knock over 8 people, including my grandmother, to turn that song off the radio when it comes on, because it just got killed. I can't do it anymore. And I blame the movie Step Brothers a little bit for killing that. I don't know if you recall that scene in Step Brothers with the
I don't.
Bundling the family
I never watched
car.
the. I never watched the movie, but I know
And
it's
I
in it.
appreciate Guns N' Roses, but it's just that particular song. There's certain songs that just.
I'm not gonna disagree with you. I mean, I love their entire catalog, and I will listen to anything when it's on, and I will actively seek out their music. But I don't necessarily disagree with you because I think that was the problem with a lot of the bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s is they had these just mega hits that, you know, the industry knew they could make money off of. So they played the hell out of them. And, um, I understand people's aversion to listening to some of these because it's like we got beat over the head with them. And I know that you and I weren't alive when MTV premiered because I think it premiered in 1982. But literally, the very first video they played on MTV was "Video Killed the Radio Star" by the Buggles,
Yeah, I
and
remember.
it's like if that's not foreshadowing, I don't know what is. That song should have really, aside from saying "Video Killed the Radio Star," that song really should have told the industry if you beat people over the head with this music, they're going to fucking resent it. And it's a disservice to the artists who actually put time and effort into these songs that have deep meaning. you know it fucks with things, and it pisses me off because there are so many songs that are great songs that I just you know I'll listen to for the purpose of nostalgia. But I think there's a distinction between listening to something for nostalgia versus listening to something that has an emotional impact on you. I think any art form should have an emotional impact on you. But when you have something like music where it makes millions of dollars or has the potential to make millions of dollars, I think when music goes from evoking an emotional response to specific nostalgia, I think it's a disservice to the music.
Yeah, well, again, I go back to if if you have an idea for a song in your head or an art form in your head, and you're willing to express that to the public and put yourself out there, I respect that a lot. If you're just some pretty face and the record company writes you songs, says, here, go sing these lyrics, and then we're going to send you across the world on a tour, and you're going to, there's no heart and soul into it. There's no emotional feel to it. I don't want to. There's a comedian from the late '80s and early '90s that passed away named Bill Hicks, and he had quite a lot to say about musicians selling their souls and doing Pepsi commercials and things like that. So you want to think you have integrity in music, and you hope that if that's that you like. I mean, there's a band like Tool, and Tool for me is the epitome of integrity in music today. They they might take 10 years to put an album out, but it's going to sound good when they put it out, and they don't
Yeah.
care about commercial. I find it ironic that they won a Grammy. I think that's amazing that they did with the new album. Which, by the way, that new album is lights
Yeah.
out. Fear
I,
Inoculum. If you
I
didn't check
downloaded
that out,
I downloaded
it's
it
a nice one.
immediately. Just so I'm making sure that you're aware, because I know that you're new to the whole StreamYard thing. Um, if you look to the right of your screen, you're going to see a tab that says comments. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Click on comments, and you'll be able to see people chatting live. So
Okay.
you'll be able to respond to them if you so choose. I don't because I don't know if your personal friends
Sure.
are gonna be jumping in the chat. So I want you to be able to acknowledge them when you see them chatting.
Well, I've seen a one comment. Yeah, the fact that, and if the Danny McDonald I'm seeing is the same person I think it is in the chat here. Um, I wasn't around for the early videos, but I certainly remember MTV music videos as being huge. In my era, I'm thinking like in the late '90s. The one for me, I'm sure you remember, is the Mariah Carey "Honey" video. Uh, right. It was fun to watch, but they played it all the time. And if you got something that's hot and all the kids love it, You got to play. It's like the radio. You play the hits, and if they beat you over the head with it, they beat you over the head with it. But it's true, they and that leads to. But the good thing that comes out of that too is, like you say, if that music upsets you, if you're not a fan of it, if you think that who are these people, getting these record deals and making money, who's telling us that these are the new pop stars that we're supposed to fawn over? That's a kick in the pants to play some music to show them. I mean, was it Metallica? I think that was like, we're gonna kill the hair bands, we're gonna murder the hair bands, and we're gonna play some in your face street music, L.A. or whatever, wherever the scene was at the time, New York City, rock and roll.
Yep.
And I think that's a statement you can make with music. All right, that's not what you want to listen to. This is where it's at, and we're going to show you why. So there's good things that come out of bad music because people almost hate or out of spite, like, I'm upset now, and I'm going to show you how music should be played. So sometimes something good comes out of it, I think.
And what's funny, I think, is heavy metal and speed metal try to kill hair metal, which I think they successfully did it. But if you look at it, like if you look at early Metallica or Pantera, they all had long hair. So it's
They
like,
did.
I mean,
But you couldn't call them a hair band. They're not. It's Twisted
right.
Sister. They were a heavyish band, but they
Yeah.
were a hair band. And
Yeah.
I've got respect for Twisted Sister. You talk about Netflix; they got a pretty good documentary on Twisted Sister on Netflix.
Yep. I've seen it.
Is the early days. It ends right when they're getting a contract. I think it was unique. I love documentaries, even if it's bands I don't care about. That was a pretty good one.
Do you remember? I don't know. I don't. They probably still had the class when you were or before you graduated, because I know that I think there was only a year or two between us. Do you remember current events? The current events class in high school.
I don't remember that specific name for a class, but I may have taken it.
I remember taking it, and this is how dedicated to music I am. Literally in my 12, 13 years of schooling, um, literally the only thing I ever got an A plus on was a report I did in current events, and the report was on the PMRC, our Parents Music Resource Center, the one that was formed by Tipper Gore to put the parental advisory label on music,
Mm-hmm.
and that happened in 1985 when I was born. Like that whole scenario happened when I was born, and to watch the old uh, Senate hearings where Dee Snider and Frank Zappa and all of them testified, it's like that is when I appreciated musicians being activists. And the one thing, and I don't know if you know this, do you know the first album that got the parental advisory sticker?
No.
You're gonna laugh. I don't specifically remember the name of it, so you're gonna have to look it up. But it was an album by Frank Zappa, and
That sounds.
the entire fucking album was instrumental.
Zappa was a cool dude. He was, first off, the man was a genius. He was smart as hell. He
Mm-hmm.
understood music. He wrote some really, people like to write off Frank Zappa as not serious, and because he incorporated comedy into his music,
Mm-hmm.
like he wasn't a serious musician. That dude could play. His band was good. He was his son Dweezil is carrying on. I know for a while I think it was called Zappa Plays Zappa, Jazz from Hell. I think
Yeah,
Zappa Plays Zappa was the name. I think he's just going by the Dweezil Zappa Band, or he might have a different name now. But
yeah.
they were, up until COVID, they were still playing, and man, they are a tight band. They had some jazz in there and improv, and just they were such a great band. Any band that has a xylophone player in the band is a cool band, in my opinion.
Yeah. Dan, thank you
Also,
for. I
in
just want to say, Dan, thank you for fact checking me so I knew the name of the album, because I literally looked it up a week ago, and I'm so old that I forgot it. So thank you for putting that in the chat.
and it shows that how out of touch our Congress has been for years in this country in the government, is they thought they were going to come in and here comes Dee Snider looking how he looks and Frank Zappa. And these guys were prepared and well spoken and laid up. There were jaws dropped in there because how well and it's freedom of speech, it's,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been problems with the FCC ever since then. Then, rap music came along and that was a whole different, Eminem had his own problems with him, but what was Carlin used to say, if you have a problem we listen to in the car, there are two knobs in the car. One turns the volume off, and the other changes the fucking channel. If you don't like what you hear, don't listen to it. It's that simple.
Although I don't watch this particular show, but I've heard the line for probably the last 10 years. Are you familiar with the show Supernatural?
I feel like I've seen the name. I don't know the content.
One of the lines from Supernatural is driver picks the music, shotgun shuts his pie hole. And I mean, it reminds me of, when you and I were growing up and, we would always, have, we would be in somebody's car. And then once we started driving, people would be in our car. And, people in, the passenger seat would always want to try and control the music. It's like, get your hands off my buttons because
right.
this is not your environment. This is my environment. You're in my world.
Yeah, kick in some gas money, and then I'll let you change the station.
Exactly. So let me see. As far as, I know you said that you're into, or you're at least willing to listen to more modern stuff. Do you still gravitate more towards the classic stuff, or do you, are you trying to keep up with current times to figure out what everybody's talking about by listening to modern music?
No, not really. I mean, I still listen to classic stuff. I don't go out of my way to learn new things. Like I said, it just, if I hear something, every now and then, usually I have my iPod going and my old school iPod going on.
You mean the one behind you?
Oh, this one up here. Yeah, this one over here, wherever it is. And I've got 4,000 songs on it, and 90% of them were made before 1990. So I usually just throw that in, let it shuffle. Every now and then I'll put on 102.7 or EQX, I believe, and catch what's going on. In fact, the other day I heard funny enough, it was actually, I guess you could call it a rap song on the station. Are you familiar with Run the Jewels at all, Killer Mike?
Yep.
I caught it midway through the song, and after two notes mid-song, I knew I was going to like it. I said, I don't know who this is or what it is, but I already knew I liked it. The song was called Ooh La La. It's off Run the Jewels 4, and I'm not a rap fan. It just hit the spot. I can't say what it is. I also find it's funny to me whenever I do find a new song or an older song that's not usually my style and I end up liking, I find out later it's for a specific reason or there's something behind it which makes sense. So, for example, I've always respected Killer Mike. He's a smart dude, and I've listened to him in a lot of conversations. So for me, it was like, oh, no wonder I like that song because it's Killer Mike. Or there was a song a few years ago, and I say a few years ago, it could be 10 years ago for all I know, it probably was. Something Get Lucky, I think is the name of the song. She's up all night to get some. I'm up all night.
It was Daft Punk. It was Daft Punk
and Pharrell Williams.
Yeah.
Now that's not something I thought I would ever like her style of music, but something about the song just clicked for me, and I really liked it. I don't know why. And then it turns out Nile Rodgers produced it. Like, that makes sense. You can hear his guitar in the song when you listen to it, and it's even when it's songs that I wouldn't typically like, I end up liking them, and then I find out something I didn't know that it's like, okay, now Rodgers was involved, and now that's why I like it. I didn't even know that at the time until I heard it.
Do you think that I mean, trying to figure out how to word this, because what you and I consider classic music is going to be almost non-existent in the lives of people in the next 10, 20 years. So from, I would say, about, well, I mean, like I said, I graduated in 03. You graduated in what, 04, 05?
Oh, five.
Okay. From about the time we graduated respectively till now, do you think that there are bands or songs that you can pinpoint that will actually be considered legitimate classics, or is that relegated to music that came before 1990?
Well, it's hard to say. I think with the music streaming platforms and how easy it is to find music online now, I'd like to think that people will be discovering the Beatles, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. I think a lot of songs will stand the test of time, and there's a reason why a lot of that music people are still listening to today.
Yeah.
Um, I actually just recently started discovering some classical music and trying to listen to some Beethoven and stuff like that, honestly. I went through during my shutdown and quarantine phase. I spent a lot of time on the internet, and I go down these rabbit holes, and I started kind of looking at the line of English monarchs and dating back the English royal family as far as I could, and back to Alfred the Great and all that. But I got to a certain point around the 1800s where there was a reference to, I don't know if it was Beethoven or somebody, and I would listen to some of the instrumental stuff in the background while I did kind of my research, and it was just fun. It's amazing to think that music was written 250 or 300 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it's still relevant today. In fact, some of these YouTube videos, if you type in Beethoven, Moonlight Sonata or whatever it might be on YouTube, there are millions and millions of views, and the comments are still to this day. So I think with the technology and the internet, I hope that, and I think you're going to see some of these songs stick around for a long time. Certainly, some bands. A lot of it too depends on parents and what. A lot of the classic stuff I listen to are because my parents do, and I listen to it. My nieces listen to the Beatles and stuff. So it's a lot of family. It's what you pass down to your kids, just like any values or songs or old folklore of any kind. Things last and things stand the test of time when you make sure that they do. So
Yeah.
if you want those songs to stick around, make sure they stick around. That's what I'd say. But I think a lot of it, and again, I don't want to be a music snob and hate on the modern music, but it just seems like the music from the 60s and 70s to a degree were just better. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I got that wrong, but there's a reason people still listen to it, and I like to think that it'll be around for a long time.
Um, as far as like modern music within the last, say, 20 years, do you think that, like, are there bands that you think will be considered classic, like bands that we grew up with versus what our parents grew up with?
Yeah, you already seen a little bit of it. Well, first off, talk to a high schooler these days or someone that age, and they'll depress you. And I worked with there's a younger guy I work with, and I asked about Eminem. I said Eminem just got, and I'm not a big rap fan, but I went through an Eminem phase for a while. I said Eminem, is he good or is he old as hell? He goes, he's pretty old, but he's pretty good too. And
Yeah.
it made me feel it like, man, if Eminem is old, then I'm old, and you're old. But uh, so, and you are seeing some of the alternative stuff getting on some of the classic rock stations. Like we have Pix 106 is the classic rock station in the area, and you'll hear Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains. Not as often.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're still going to hear, Feel Like Making Love and Bad Company over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But it's nice to hear that. In fact, there's another station, 105.7 around here, and I'm not sure the name of the channel, but they call it I don't know if it's the term they use, but modern classic or new classic, and they play a lot of the Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Pearl Jam and stuff like that. And this stuff, it is 20, 30 years old in a lot of cases, 25, 30 years old. So yeah, I mean, that's classic music. So we're getting to that stage, but to a degree, I wonder if do they start dumping off some of the old material? Do they stop playing some of the 60s and 70s stuff to make room for the 80s and 90s and these classic rock stations? They probably should to a
Yeah.
degree, but again, it depends on the songs and how
Now,
relevant they still are.
being that you and I are only in our 30s, does it piss you off when somebody who is, 10, 12 years younger than us, does it piss you off when they call the music that you and I grew up with classic? Does it piss you off in the sense of making you feel really old?
Not that much. In fact,
No.
in that song that I referenced, that Run the Jewels song, Ooh La La,
Mm-hmm.
he references Old Dirty Bastard in the song. In fact, some of
Yep.
the flow of the song is similar to Shimmy Shimmy Ya, and
Mm-hmm.
he references ODB in the song. And somebody in the comment section of this very recent song said, "It's nice to see Killer Mike representing his elders," or something like that. So when you're calling ODB an elder, yeah, we're getting old. So I mean, I
Yeah.
don't take offense to it. It is what it is. Time flies.
It's just funny because I think my mom, anytime we talk about music from her era when she was our age or younger, um, she still cringes when it's called classic music because I mean, I think it's because people up to a certain point don't consider themselves old yet, but um, it's just weird that the music from our parents' era that we consider classic rock, our parents tend to get offended when we say classic because we're insinuating that it's old as shit. Um, it's just how far back, if like, does your taste in music go? Like, do you listen to like Elvis or Sinatra or any of that era, or is it more 70 or 60s and up?
More 60s, like I say, it was more rock, more guitar music. Guitar riff music was always is what I tend to,
Hmm.
I guess, classify what I listen to, and in any whether it's 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or today. If you got a good guitar riff in the song, I'm probably gonna like it. So no, not really much of it. I mean, I can appreciate some of the beginning of the rockabilly and stuff, Carl Perkins and Elvis in those days because of what they influenced. All of my favorite classic bands were influenced. Tom Petty specifically was a big Elvis fan. Got to meet Elvis when he was a kid. His mom brought him to meet Elvis. That was huge for him. So that launched his whole career.
Yeah.
And there's other bands that I respect from those. I respect Frank Sinatra. I actually just watched a documentary on Netflix the other day on Sinatra, part one. It's pretty good. Amazing career, and he was the pop star of his era. He was the biggest thing in music, and of course everyone propped him up on a pedestal. For there's that whole line. I shook Sinatra's hand. That was a thing.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate the older music. I'm not going to go listen to Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
But
It's
I can
it's
appreciate some of the older music. The Everly Brothers wrote some good old songs. Carl
Yep.
Perkins, like I said, and a lot of that rockabilly. It's nice to see, and I have an appreciation for a lot of blues music. That's something I've gone back on my own and listened to more. A lot of the old original blues guys, the Three Kings, Albert Beebe and Freddie King.
Yep.
And Lightning Hopkins, and a lot of these guys. I want it to a degree to see where the origins of the stuff I like came from, and to see it come out of that, and the fact that the Brits and the Brit invasion, we owe them such a debt of gratitude for returning to us the music that this country had ignored for so long.
Yeah.
Um, so it's great, and it's nice to see that they did that. But again, it's more riff rock for me. If you got a good guitar in the song, I'm probably going to like it. So that's what I listen to. But I do have an appreciation for the where it all got started.
Yeah.
Buddy Holly and Chuck Berry, and you gotta tip the cap to the.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this is going to make you throw up in your mouth because I know, at least from memory, I don't know that you've ever really spoken positively or even at all about listening to this. What is your opinion of country music?
Again, I tend to like the older country. I cannot do the modern country music. I think it's brutal. It's not. Tom Petty once said, "Modern country bands are just bad rock bands with a fiddle," and that kind of made a lot. It summed it up a lot for me. But there's again the classics. Waylon Jennings and a little bit of Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson, and I love Johnny Cash. Love Johnny
Yes.
Cash.
Yeah.
Um, Hank Jr. I love Hank Williams Jr. David Allan Coe's got some good stuff that I really like. It's something about the classic music, and again, it's nostalgia. My grandfather was a beer drinking, cowboy hat wearing, upstate redneck, if you want to call it that, I guess. And
Right.
it was just those are old memories of country music in the backyard of my grandparents' house, and I got to appreciate it more as I got older. And I just something about, like I say, I try not to, be a music snob, and I try to not lock myself into a certain box. But some things just hit the spot. Some things I hear just sound right, and the old classic country does it for me, and the new stuff not so much.
Um, what song do you? I mean, if there's or one specific song at all, or more than one, what song, in your opinion, has had the most or the strongest and most impactful message that you can remember? Like some like lyrics that really spoke to you.
Boy, it's tough. I don't always care that much about lyrics, to be honest with you. For me, vocals are important. Led Zeppelin was a big example of that. The lyrics don't matter in Led Zeppelin songs. It's about the vocals and how the feel of the music and the sound. So I
Hmm.
couldn't tell you what a single Led Zeppelin song is about, because if you listen to the lyrics, they're mostly bullshit. Just kind of rhyming words together, in my opinion. And a lot of rock and roll is like that. A lot of it's
Yeah.
more about the feel than the message in a lot of ways. But certain certain styles of music more so than others. Obviously, the lyrics are important. Rap music, country music are two big ones where the lyrics are everything.
Yeah.
To those songs. I mean, the beat's great in rap music in particular, and there's some good music in country, but it's about the lyrics. It's hard to say. John Prine was a hell of a lyricist, and the lyrics to Sam Stone are pretty haunting and relevant. And that line, "There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money is just it's so full of imagery, and you can put yourself when you can paint a picture with lyrics like that and put yourself, if you just flash back to Vietnam and from a kid's point of view and the struggles of a father and how real that was for such a huge part of the country. So I appreciate the singer songwriters that can make lyrics work. John Prine was a big one, but it's tough to really find a lyric or lyrics that really make had an impact on my life, or to other people. I can't really think of one, honestly. Nothing's really coming to mind.
Um, I'm trying to think here. As far as what we were talking about off stream, as far as what we remember school being versus the shit show that it has turned into today. Um, you know, things that we have learned since graduating that we really should have learned in school, or that were taught to us in school but incorrectly. Um, when you have a situation like that, is it important to lean on music or art in general that talks about a specific time or a time period to understand that time period? And if I'm going to relate it to music, I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as um, "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel, because we were talking specifically about history class being absolute bullshit and not really teaching us the things that we needed to be taught, and learning so much after we graduated that was completely counter to what they taught us in school. So I'm curious, when music has the ability lyrically and visually to teach you more than people who are designated educators, what does that say for the quality of education we're getting, and what does that say about how we should embrace music and art more?
Well, culture is obviously always very important. You know, it's what we are as the human race. It's what separates us from the animals. It's art and culture and language and history, and it's actually all important. Music can teach to a degree. 60s counterculture was a big part of it, and that was one way to let a lot of people know that maybe the things they were being taught and maybe the things that their parents were telling them weren't true. And you look at the origins of the Vietnam War, and like we talked earlier, about the CIA having a foot all over the planet in the name of greatness, U.S. greatness.
Yeah.
We can go down that path. We don't have to. Um, so yeah, music and culture are huge, and they're a way of bringing people together over common ideas and things. And music is certainly a great one. I've got lots of friends. We differ politically in opinions, but music is something one cousin in particular that we've argued left versus right politics for years. But we've been to 10 or 12 concerts together, and we're friends. And it's so music is always a great mediator. It's something to bring people together in culture and art too. Teachers, I think, have a hard time in school, especially these days, and more so given in the information era and how quick it is to get information, whether it's right or wrong on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't envy the job of teachers today. I can't imagine trying to teach history or current events in this climate. I remember being in school, and Hillary Clinton was the senator for New York at the time, and she came to the Wood Theater, and as a class, we went and listened to her speak. It was just happened to be the state senator. She spoke. As a history class, we went and listened to her speak. That was it.
Yeah.
Now, if that happened today, things would be a lot different. I mean, I remember hanging out with my friends in the balcony listening to her speak, and we were more concerned with how close to the Secret Service agents do you think we could get before they, just making stupid jokes because they had the
Yeah.
walkie-talkies and the deal. We didn't care about her politics or what she stood for or anything about that. These days, I feel like everybody is immersing themselves in the culture war and in what's going on in the world that I don't envy the job of teachers today.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much extra bullshit you got to deal with. And even back in our age, too, I don't think that teachers were trying to mislead us or um, try to give us a false picture of what the world is. But how much leeway do teachers have off of the curriculum? How much can they get away with saying? And what is a teacher's job to let us know about, I mean, things in the world? To what degree are they supposed to fill us in on? Yeah, I mean, school should be prepping you for the future, and I think they should be teaching financial literacy in school and how to maintain a bank account and stock market and things that are going to actually help you be a person. In my senior year at Glens Falls, I took a class that was like a college preparation course. Each
Mm-hmm.
semester was broken up into 4 departments. One was like basic, how to do laundry and how to cook simple things. One was how to balance a checkbook and bank account. One was, change a tire in your car and a spark plug and how to build a shelf and just things that are supposed to help you in life. And it was an elective class that I opted to take. But it would
Yeah.
be nice if more of those things were mandatory, because teachers do have a huge say in what in the point of view that students have on the world. Um, so, to what degree should teachers be deviating from the curriculum, and what do we do about it? I mean, you got to vote for. I mean, if you care about what's going on locally, you got to vote for school boards and superintendents and things like that, and you got to get a hand locally. But again, I don't envy teachers these days. It's got to be tough. Again, I don't feel like I was misled in my education at all, but there are a lot of things that you learn about the real world that you don't learn until school. And history is a big one too. History books are the most purchased books
Yep.
of adults later in life. A lot of people, history can be the most boring class, depending on who's teaching it or what books you're reading from. But everybody wants to learn history when they leave school. Everybody does. I mean,
Hmm.
most of the books that I own are, in reference to things that happen in history. And I try to learn the most I can. But I don't necessarily blame teachers for, misleading me. I don't think I would go that far.
Well, I'm going to challenge that just a little. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but based on information that I've seen the last couple weeks, I'm just going to challenge that just a little, just because
Sure.
I want to get your perspective. So this is me, not me, like attacking anything you said, but I'm just curious of what your perspective is. You and I not being parents, we wouldn't necessarily be privy to this information, but I think earlier this year there was, or when COVID hit, there were several um, college professors that wrote a letter saying that they were absolutely terrified with bringing their classes online because it allowed parents to see what their kids were being taught. And they were genuinely fearful that, with parents actually seeing what their kids were being taught, that the things that were happening behind closed doors in universities were going to be exposed. And that got me thinking because I mean, I took classes at the local community college here, um, in where I live here in Virginia, and there was no indoctrination. But I think because I was taking such specific classes, they didn't have the ability to indoctrinate me in any way. But I think within the last week, there were reports that had come out where a math curriculum from California, and it showed, how, when you and I were dealing with math problems in school, it was, this bushel or this basket can hold this many apples and this many oranges, but there are this many apples and this many oranges. How or what percentage won't fit into the basket? Now the math problems are saying, if a white cop shoots 4 black guys and 5 white men, what percentage of black men are safe versus being shot? Like that's an actual math problem that's in uh, elementary math books right now. And the one thing that concerns me is being with the COVID shit that happening right now. Um, there was I forget where it happened. I think it was in Tennessee, so it's about 3 hours from me. A parent went online with a video of an email that he got, and people or educators in Tennessee are forcing parents to sign a waiver saying that they will not look in on the virtual classes that their kids are taking because they don't want the kids, or they don't want the parents to see what the kids are learning. And that is, to me, that is an extreme violation to tell parents you're not allowed to know what your kids are learning, because when you and I were growing up, they actually invited parents to come in and observe the classes. So it makes me wonder what the hell switched.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember them allowing parents into the classrooms, and I can see how that could be a distraction for a lot of kids.
Well, it
Um,
was it was more so before. It was more so when I was in grade school. I It didn't necessarily happen when we were in middle school and high school, but I
sure,
remember it happening when I was in grade school. So relatively before I met you.
right. Yeah, as far as that, I would have to look into that. If that math problem you put to me was actually in an elementary school textbook, I would find that to be a problem. I would have to look into that on my own. I would highly doubt that they would word a question like that to
Oh no,
elementary school children.
it's legit. Like the parent actually took a screenshot of it and posted it on Facebook. I'll actually send you the article after we're off stream.
Now, I can see how it would be a problem, especially for kids that are trying to learn. It's already the distraction trying to learn online has got to be difficult when you're
Hmm.
as a kid in your own home when you can just, oh, I've got toys over here, or oh, my TV's over there. I'm going to watch TV while you know. So that's already comes with its own problems. I think it would be more difficult having parents looking over the shoulder while the kids are learning. But if it's from the point of view that you're saying teachers are trying to, behind the backs of parents, indoctrinate their children through the way they're wording questions and things, I don't know about all that. I'm not saying there aren't certain teachers out there that have agendas, and especially in college with college
Yeah,
professors, college campuses these days are, my God,
trash.
it's just that's a whole different discussion. But
Yeah.
I don't know how it's like I say, it's got to be tough to teach kids these days with the COVID and all that going on, and you don't want parents looking over shoulders during lessons, but you shouldn't be hiding your lessons from them because you're worried of what the parents think you're teaching kids. However, these days, and all over the country, particularly in the South and other areas too, parents have problems with the curriculums and what kids are being taught. And some places of the country, people think you shouldn't teach evolution. And some places of the country think you should be teaching religion, which I don't want to go down that route. But it's,
Right. No,
again,
I get what you mean.
I'm not an academic. I'm not involved. I would certainly uh, be concerned with what my kids were learning and what my teachers were telling them. And I would want to, if there's doing an online class and I'm at home, why wouldn't I want to look over just to see what they're being taught?
Not to
So I'm
mention,
not sure. I'd have to look into that a little more because I don't know a lot of the details. But
it
it's
just
like I say, it's just tough. It's a tough climate for teachers and students these days. And also, the word indoctrination is tough because, I mean, I said this just the other day. The idea of, I'm not against the Pledge of Allegiance in school, but it's odd to think about having 4-year-olds standing there in a line with their hand on their heart, looking at the flag, pledging allegiance to a flag. I find that odd. Now, do you call that indoctrination? My friend that I work with says it is. I don't know.
to a certain
If you
degree.
teach kids anything at a young enough age, it's kind of indoctrination. If you tell your kid, oh, that's a '63 Chevy that just drove by, it's you're giving information to youth, to young minds that are very, they aren't fully developed yet. So I'm pro school. I think kids should learn in school, but it's easy to use the word indoctrination when kids are learning things that you might be against personally.
Well, and I don't think it's. I don't think it's when you've got teachers saying we don't want parents knowing what we're teaching their kids.
Now,
I
if that's
think,
the actual case, there's a problem with that.
yeah, I think that actually opens the door to say we're indoctrinating your kids with things that they don't, or that with things that are either inaccurate or things that they do not need to know.
I would like parents to have. I don't know um, the procedure on determining curriculum for schools and states and counties in
See,
this country.
even though we aren't parents, I wish we knew more about that. Even as
Well,
students, I wish we had known more about that.
that's if there is any openness, if there's any ability for parents to know what's in the curriculum beforehand, if there's a way to have a say in it. I don't know how it works. It would be nice to have like town hall style, common council meetings or things like that where parents could come and you could not vote, but that's why we have school board representatives.
Mm-hmm.
We appoint people to the school boards that hopefully we trust or that we find are good people to have, you know, only want to teach and encourage kids. Hopefully that's what's going on, but you never know. And these days, it's harder and harder to trust people these days, especially in the political climate that we're in. It feels like everybody is digging in on their sides. The
Mm-hmm.
tribalism these days is worse than it ever has been.
Yeah.
So you definitely have people with agendas on both sides and in the middle
Oh
trying
yeah.
to get onto school boards to sway what kids might be learning. And that's kind of scary. I'm not saying this stuff hasn't always gone on in this country. And when I was younger, I certainly didn't think of the word that. It's
I think
it's also nice to look back when you were a kid as, boy, the world was better back then. But when you're a kid, you're not paying attention to the,
I think
finance and
I
things like
think
that. So it's easy to look back nostalgically saying things were much better when I was a kid than they are now, when we have all this burden and we got to pay bills and pay our mortgages and things like that.
I think I think you touched on something very important because I think when you said, you're not saying that it hasn't always happened, I think the difference is that we're aware of it now. And it makes us look back and go, how long was this going on? And what have I been misled about? And that's what I don't like.
Yeah, and I've certainly more, again, I don't have kids, but over the last couple of years, I can see that concern of, what are
But
my kids being taught?
you have nieces and nephews, though, don't you?
I got two nieces, yep. And one's 7 and one is 2, or
Uh
about
huh.
to be 3. So one's in school and she's doing I think she's going to be doing the online classes or a combination of maybe every other day or something. So, and that's a whole, that's tough on obviously my sister who works, and it's, I don't envy anybody in this situation. It's such an odd time. And
Yeah.
I don't, I don't know enough about the process, to really have an opinion on it. It's just I feel bad for everybody involved, and I would certainly be more concerned as a parent learning things in school these days, with or without COVID, than I would before, maybe. And especially, yeah, given what we know now, and when you look at the history of the world and the
Yeah.
things we were taught in school versus what's actually there. But it does go back to what degree does a history teacher tell you? Oh, by the way, our government has interfered in elections all over the world and overthrown dictators, and is that something? I mean, how essential to is that? And at what age do you teach kids that? And how do you bring it up at all? And it's tough to. I do. The government obviously has the incentive to keep certain things from us for national security purposes or whatever. And you hope it's strictly for national security and not because of indoctrination and
Right.
not wanting us to find things out. It's messy, and it's a crazy time in history, and it's I
To
don't know.
put things back, in the context of music, just because I don't want to deviate too far. When you think about, and actually, I don't know. Yeah, you were in the stream the day that I had the discussion with Mrs. Armstrong.
Yeah.
What is, from your recollection of school, what is your opinion as far as the way that music is taught in school? Do you think there's a way to use music education to inform students better than regular like core class academia? Do you think that they could inform students better through an art form like music than they could with academia as it stands today?
Yeah, I think so. I think because music is something that people appreciate more, and it doesn't seem like it's not math or history or English, to where it's all about the work and learning and learning and learning and making sure you pass the test. Music, it seems more fun. There's a lot you learn from it, and like one of the comments here, you can learn a lot. 60s rock and roll, you learn a lot about what's going on in 60s society. Um, a lot of rappers these days are rapping about what's going on in their community. Not just these days; they have been forever. Go listen to Ice Cube. And those guys in the '90s, the LA riots and stuff going on, and they were speaking in a lot of ways to what's going on in neighborhoods and on the street, and a lot of stuff a lot of people weren't seeing. So yeah, there's a place in music to teach. And because it's not a classic, academic subject, I don't want to use the word academic, because it's not an English or a math or something that
Right.
there's all this pressure on you to learn. Music is more fun. And if at any point a teacher can make a class more fun and relatable and enjoyable, it's better for the kids. I still remember I remember in Mrs. Armstrong's class, the Beatles lessons. Love Me
Yep.
Do and 62. I remember it to this day. I was in 8th grade. I have not taken a music class since, so I'm not sure what it was like in high school, but I loved her class. I learned a lot about it, and it's something that stuck with me to this day. And when you can teach kids in a more fun way, it's more meaningful. I had Mrs. Parrott, environmental science at Glens Falls,
I knew
and
where I didn't.
she
Yeah,
was
I
a
knew where I
fun,
didn't have
fun
her.
lady. She was a deadhead. She talked about being at a Grateful Dead concert in Washington when Mount St. Helens erupted,
Wow.
and things like that. So it's just those things like that. That's a story that I've always remembered that stuck with me.
Yeah.
So it's when you have a teacher that can get through, it makes all the difference in any subject, but especially in a subject like music, or I don't want to say phys ed is like a music because you learn more, but it's when you can have a class that doesn't have the pressure on you to learn like some of these other courses, it can go a long way. And if you have a fun teacher that can put it in a fun way, that it makes all the difference.
Well, and you talk about phys ed, and I don't know why this just popped into my head, but if you incorporate music into phys ed, you know, with the track unit that we always had in middle school and high school, where we would always have to go out on the track. If you play, music like "Eye of Tiger" by Survivor, you associate that with the Rocky movies, and if you can visualize somebody, achieving a goal that you're trying to achieve at the same time while listening to that music, I think that correlation can help you better succeed in what you're doing.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be maybe a healthy mix, because I don't know how long you were in the stream when I was talking to Mrs. Armstrong, but we talked about the fact that, um, oh shit, why did my brain just freeze? Um, yeah, I completely just lost that thought. Damn it all. I hate
Well,
being old,
she
dude.
she also she had that ability to, like you say, to get through to students. Just the way that she approached her class,
Yeah,
and when you can use something fun or something people appreciate, like music, to inform your lesson,
yeah,
it goes a long way. And I remember in gym class, there was periods where we were just working out in the gym, running and getting in shape, and we got to bring in music. I brought in a Rush CD one day in the school. Everyone loved the Rush that I brought in. It was fun. So, and Zerlo, I don't know if you remember Coach Zerlo. He said, "Good music today. Good music today." Or it may have
Zer-
been Lilac. I can't remember. One of the coaches I had.
Zer-
The higher level
Zerlo
years, I had both.
Zerlo was an interesting individual. I never had him, but he was an interesting individual. He had this. I don't even know if it was intentional, but he had this bravado about him that made him very intimidating. And
He could be sometimes, but he was a fun guy. He was known for assigning everybody a nickname. Basically, everyone
yeah,
had a nickname, and he would. I remember when we were playing some. I can't remember what sport it was in class, but it was. I don't know if it was. I can't remember the names. There was some kind of a sport involving a soccer ball outside, but you had to like toss it in the air like you're dribbling in the air kind of thing, but you
yep,
can run. I can't remember the name of it. Speedball comes in, but I don't think that's the name of it. I can't remember. He used to say things like, defending this side, Sully's east, and this side will be Sully's west. Like he's referencing Glens Falls bars in his
yeah.
gym class as deviating side. I just thought that was funny. And he
And
was
actually, that
he
actually
was
brings up a
obviously
good.
very athletic, and we had a badminton class. I
Uh
remember in
huh.
phys ed, and the team that won had to play him straight up, and he just smoked him. Just smoked him. It was amazing to see. It's badminton in the gymnasium, and he's just smoking people. It was
Yeah.
cool to see. He was a fun guy.
When you make reference to him talking about Sully's East versus Sully's West, that's another thing where teachers and educators alike could easily incorporate music and get kids interested. You know, make a reference to a song or a band or a song lyric in the midst of something, and that's something that the kids are going to, even if they don't latch onto it at that time, they're going to latch onto it at some point, because it's going to be something seemingly innocuous that doesn't seem to have any place there, but it's going to make you remember that concept that they're teaching you. And I don't know if you know the person who just typed in the chat, but I'm going to have to yell at them, because Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Nirvana, she said that they're going to be considered classics for sure. How dare you? Because that makes me feel really old that they would be considered classics. How dare you?
Oh, but they're 20, 27, 28, 30 years old, some of these songs, man.
I know. Um,
But yeah, but one other thing I remember from music in school, you had Tim Graham as a teacher.
Yeah.
I had him as well. I did not do great in his class. It was Earth Science. I think I took Earth Science with him,
Yep.
and there was one lesson I remember, maybe the only lesson I remember from the year I took with him was we had some kind of rocks or something we had to put into these water bottles, and you had to shake them continuously for like 10 straight minutes or something. It was the only way
Hmm.
to get the chemical reaction you needed. You had to keep it moving for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
To help us keep rhythm and time, he would play music in class. So we were in class shaking these water bottles to "I Want to Soak Up the Sun" by Sheryl Crow. That was the one song I remember. And then there was another song too, a better song that came on, and it was much easier to keep the beat to the song because you had to keep that beat to. I can't remember what the experiment was, but the only thing I remember was listening to music in that class to help us keep the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, music can definitely have an effect.
Um, you talked about, you briefly mentioned the information age. Um, I think with what we're seeing socially and politically today, you know, I think people need to be willing to do their own research in the sense that when you have like the protests that are going on right now, um, I think the way to keep them from devolving into riots is, to have people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And when you look at the protests that we have today, I wish, and I said this in a previous stream, I wish that more people would reflect back on protest music, um, early protest music, because especially with the subjects that are being talked about today, if you go back and reference a lot of the activisty type songs that Michael Jackson did, um, you can really get a sense for how to get your message across if you're trying to put forth a message. Because especially with the song Black or White, I think that if people listen to that song more in depth, they'll understand how to connect with people and really put forth the message that they're trying to send. I don't understand why people don't lean on, more of the earlier music to see how these activisty type musicians sent their message, because they sent their message in such a way that it wasn't alienating one side of their fan base. It actually sent the message in a universal way, and that's why I say that they say that music is the universal language. But I feel like the music of today is, so, I'm not going to say all of it, but a lot of the music I hear today is very biased. Like, oh, I hear a lot of bias in the music today, and it's more so getting the people to think one way versus getting people to understand a concept.
Yeah, well, it's tough to. I mean, it's tough to expect a song to cover all points of an argument. I think in a lot of ways, I wouldn't necessarily say it's biased, but if you have an opinion on a matter and you want to express it in song, I'm all for it. And there was, I mean, the counterculture and the protest music, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and the Mamas and Papas, and uh, I'm not sure if they got too political, but they were in that era.
Oh yeah,
Peter
Mamas
Paul
and
and
the
Mary,
Papas.
and
Yeah, Mamas and the
so
Papas, Beach Boys,
so
Peter
to
Paul
me,
and
they
Mary.
they
Yeah.
were able to make a statement with their music, which is good. Now you can't always knock someone for not covering all sides. Black and White's one. Paul McCartney did "Ebony and Ivory" with Stevie Wonder back in the day, and it was a good song. It's tough these days. I don't think music is going to get through to people like that. Ideally, yeah, people would come together and listen to Bob Marley type music. That's very very relevant today. A lot of Bob Marley stuff,
Hmm.
and I wish people would look more at the message of Dr. King and peaceful protest and John Lewis and that era of it. But I mean, the LA riots back in the 61 in 62 or whenever it was back then in the 60s, they've been peacefully protesting for years in this country, and the same problems keep coming up. So when you've been peace protesting forever, and you've rioted, and you've burnt buildings down, and you've set police cars on fire, and the same stuff still keeps happening, what do you do? I can't. As much as I try to say the Dr. King message is the way to do it, the John Lewis message, peaceful protest, I feel like I don't want to get too deep into this because you can get yourself into trouble sometimes talking about this stuff. But I feel like with the George Floyd protest, with the George Floyd murder, when they murdered him on in broad daylight in the street,
Yeah.
you finally had the attention of everybody. It helped, unfortunately, that a lot of people were stuck at home during the coronavirus, but the message was clear. I don't know a single person that was okay with what the police officers did to George Floyd in the street. So, from my point
Well,
of view, I feel like you finally have the attention of everybody. Everybody's you got white people marching in Glens Falls down the street. I was one of them. I was there marching too. Uh, it's for a cause that I care about, and a lot of people care about it. And then when it devolves to rioting and setting things on fire, and then it's tough. It's like, I mean, when you're burning the American flag out in front of the White House, I get the anger, but for me, I don't appreciate that. So I felt like you had everyone's attention. Everyone recognized, okay, we're with you on this one. You're 100% right. Now, then is the time to bring out the Dr. King method and the John Lewis. And, hey, you're all paying attention now. Are we all seeing what's been going on for decades in this country? Now let's do something about it.
the
But again,
problem,
it's tough for me to blame. You won't catch me, burning and rioting, but how much can you take? When this has been going on for decades in this country, and a lot of shit has not changed. So I try to see all sides, and I try to be a mediary. It's tough. I don't. I will say this as an Italian American: if every other day in this country, someone with the name Rizzo or Russo or you know D'Angelo or whatever it is, if it was consistently Italian Americans that were unarmed and being murdered in the streets all the time, I probably wouldn't be too put about it. I probably wouldn't just be politely saying we would like our freedom now. I would be saying, why does this keep happening? We tried Dr. King. We had Malcolm X. We rioted. We protested. We marched. Selma. Everything else. It's like something's give. And I don't think music, as much as I would love to see, people playing live, without everyone standing out in front of the White House, I would love to have a musician down there with a microphone, preaching peace and bringing everyone together and doing those things. But I don't, I can't even give a real opinion on it because I have no idea what some of these people are going through. And if you're a person of color, and like I said, you've seen it going on and on and on,
well, and I don't even,
I don't know. I don't know what to say.
the problem is they talk, when they talk about, people being oppressed, it always devolves, it always devolves into, the people that are oppressed are the people of color. Here's the problem I have with that. And this is actually leading into why I asked, what your opinion was as far as bias in music, because um, in the late '80s, early '90s, and even into the mid 2000s, the majority of rap songs that you listen to, every rapper talked about aspiring to be Donald Trump. They wanted to be this man, like they wanted to rub elbows with this man. As soon as he declared his intent to run for office, he instantly became this racist, bigot, homophobic, this, that, and whatever. And it's like, wait, there's a rapper from the early 2000s named Young Jock. He has a song called "It's Going Down," and I specifically remember a lyric in that song. It said, "The boys in the hood call me Black Donald Trump." And it's like, how can how can Beyonce and Jay-Z go from talking about sipping martinis at Mar-a-Lago to bashing the man that they were just praising 6 months ago. That's what I don't get. That's why I don't like the bias and the hypocrisy in music. And when you talk about the method of protest, um, the issue I have with that is when George Floyd was murdered. Yes, he was murdered. No, none of us agree that he should have died. None of us think that he should have died. But the problem is, we found out 2 weeks ago. I think it was like 2 weeks ago that not all footage of that incident was released. There was body cam footage that was released 2 weeks ago that shows that he was actively aggressive toward these officers. So while I do not agree that he should have died, he was actively aggressive toward these officers. So they were trying to subdue him. So I don't agree with the actions they took, but we were not there, and it may have been the only option they had at the time. Yes, they acted hastily, but in the heat of the moment, none of us were there. But what irritates me about the media is they only released part of the footage back in March or April or May or whenever it happened. And that sparked all of this bullshit when in reality, they could have released the body cam footage and given us the full perspective of what happened. And I don't think we would have seen 30 people die in these riots so far just in the name of George Floyd being murdered. Because if you're protesting somebody dying, killing other people in the process completely invalidates your message.
Well, sure. I mean, I'd have to check the death totals from the riots across the country since the George Floyd murder. But as far as them subduing him, yeah, I would like to see more footage because there was one scene from my memory of the footage where he's just standing by the building with the officers, and then
That was
as
before
someone
the
said at one point
altercation started.
he
Yeah.
may have been all what was in the back of the police car at one point. I want to know the whole series of events because I want to know how do you go from he's obviously very peacefully standing there to then being 8 minutes and 4 seconds. He was laying in that street. When you say they're trying to subdue him, he looked pretty subdued when they were kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes.
Well,
And
of course, when they were.
he was limp and non-responsive for 2 straight minutes while he kept. One of the officers said, "I don't think he's breathing,"
No,
and then for
I
two
know
more
that.
minutes he sat on him. So I don't know about that. Another thing too, if you should not be allowed to be a police officer if you cannot physically detain a grown man. I think a lot of these police officers are cowards in many senses. If you are so afraid of one, first off, the one that just happened in Wisconsin, we don't know all the details yet. They shot him in the back 7 times. Why couldn't, and someone said maybe they tased him first and the taser didn't work, but you've got two cops there with guns. One of those cops can't tackle him. And if you're not physically strong enough to restrain a grown man, you should not be a police officer.
The problem
Another
with
statement I'd like to bring up because I've heard this from multiple. I've heard this from longtime police officers. I've heard this from new local police officers. And I'm wearing the hat. You see, I'm a big Andrew Yang fan. He thinks that police officers should be a purple belt in like a jujitsu or something like that to be able to be a police officer. Now we can agree that they need more training. If you are confident in your ability to take down a suspect without a weapon, you are not afraid and you're less likely to shoot somebody. I think that should be the new norm is you have to be able to be confident in your ability to physically take down a suspect, even if they have a knife or not, without killing them. I
the
saw a
pro-
clip the other day. I know I'm going on for a bit.
yeah,
My
because
friend showed me.
I'm trying to respond a little, but
There was what I'm assuming was a homeless gentleman. He was laying at a bus stop. You may have seen this video. My friend showed me on his phone. I haven't seen it since. 3 or 4 police officers with long guns came up and said, "Sir, wake up." I'm not sure. I don't know the guy's background. I don't know what he did. He was sleeping drunk at a bus stop. They told him to get up. There's 3 or 4 cops aiming long barrel guns at him, and he's sitting on a bench now. And he says, "Fuck you! You ain't gonna shoot me." Reaches to scratch himself or to pull his pants up, and they shot him. Bang, 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 bang. The guy's dead.
well,
There were
that's
4 cops with guns. This guy was drunk and old and homeless. One of them Not one of these heroes, not one of these brave men of the law can come over and grab him, tackle him, wrap him up, handcuff him. Maybe two of them can go apprehend him while the one cop aims the gun at him. It's easy for me to say because I'm not a cop, and I've seen police be murdered at traffic stops and everything else, and I have enormous respect for law enforcement, especially local law enforcement, you know. But you have to agree that when you keep seeing these videos over and over and over again, something's got to give. One of those cops could have hit him with a club. One of those cops could have been trying to handcuff him while the other cop held the gun. Then, if
Okay,
he's trying to attack the cop that's arresting him, the other cop can shoot him because he's attacking an officer.
what you
So
need
there's a lot to go on, and we didn't see enough evidence. And I agree. There's a good chunk of the George Floyd tapes that we haven't seen, and I want to know how you get from him standing there to him laying in the street dead.
I can actually I know where the footage is and I can send it to you. But what you the one or I read an article the other day where somebody admitted, just a random citizen admitted that when she saw somebody interacting with the cops, she was keeping her eye on it, but the only time she started recording was when the cops started getting aggressive with the person. So that's also where we're being misled. Is, we may be missing the full context because the full context may not be, you know on record, because these people know what the story is going to be if the full context is, you know released. As far as George Floyd, it has been released that he was heavily under the influence of drugs when
I
he
don't
was
care.
when he was detained.
That doesn't
So
you know.
no, it does, because it's a Rodney King issue. Because Rodney King was on PCP, and when you're on, drugs like that, it makes you erratic. As far as the guy who was just shot in Wisconsin, what we didn't see at first was the fact that they did use a taser on him,
I heard that. Yeah,
but the reason that they ended up firing on him was because he had broken out of his restraints and went to reach for something in his car. They wanted to, they didn't have time to react. They had to, stop whatever he was doing.
7
So
shots in the back.
they had to stop whatever he was doing because they didn't know what he was going to come back with. Like you said, you're not a cop, so you can't really speak to it. But I think before anybody, especially on social media, before anybody speaks to these incidents, they have to understand. They have to do their own research and understand the full context of what's going on, and get all of the angles out there.
Yeah, I too. I tend to hold back on speaking on a lot of issues until I know because, like the situation. I'm going off topic here with the Covington Catholic kid that was at the protest. He had the MAGA hat on and was a Native
Yeah.
American gentleman that was banging the drum.
Yeah,
We
I
only
don't
saw
remember
part of
his
that, and
name.
that turned into much more than it was. I'm glad I
Yeah.
don't remember his name. I don't need to know. You can keep it yourself. But I'm just kidding. But it's again, I'm going to go back to cops need to be trained better in general. If
Yeah.
you can't physically detain a grown man, you should not be a cop. And also, I don't care about drugs at all. And if I don't know a single person that can watch the Rodney King tapes and be okay with it. I don't care if he was shooting Thorazine into his eyeballs, to quote a great comedian. There's no excuse for 6 or 7 or 8 officers beating him with clubs for how long did that go on for?
No, I know, and
One of those cops could have handcuffed him while the other 8 officers beat him with clubs. Or in
but
case of George Floyd, one of the cops could have handcuffed him and got him in the car while the other cop knelt on his neck. And they could have done that in just a couple of minutes as opposed to 8 minutes and 46.
but the thing is, what we don't.
There's
The
a
thing is,
lot of these police officers are cowards, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that to all of them because I know police officers, and a lot of them are good people that do the job for the right reason. But some of these police officers are cowards. If you cannot physically detain a grown man, you should not be a police officer.
I understand that, but what, like you said, you're not a police officer, so you're not you. you see these situations after they've already played out.
Yeah.
And as far as what Dan was saying in the chat, as far as, Floyd not being erratic for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, that is discounting what we, don't
What we
know.
may not know, right?
Yeah, that's discounting what we may not know, because no one's going to sit there and say that George Floyd deserved to die.
Of course not.
But
Whether he was on drugs or not.
but he was or until a week ago, we only knew half the story. Now we have more of the body cam video, and they actually withheld the body cam video, and that's why we didn't see it until recently. But
Well,
here's the thing: when somebody is on drugs, because we grew up in Glens Falls, dude. We've seen our share of drug heads and how erratic they can be, and they're not necessary. They're, especially when you're the size of George Floyd. That man was massive, so it probably took two or three to subdue him, in the sense that they had to all, you know, descend on him to make sure that he was able to be controlled. No, and like I said, they shouldn't have put their knee on his neck. That I completely agree
for the
with.
length of time.
Right.
But it looked like he was subdued with a knee on the neck. How could they not then transfer him to the back of that police car? Why did it take 8 minutes and 46 seconds to kneel on him until they got him in the back car?
That the whole 8 minutes 46 seconds thing, we don't know how much of a fight he was giving up, or he was giving when he was down, because wasn't really a clear shot. But based on the cops that have come out and spoken that were there, they said that he was very erratic. And like I said, when you have citizen journalists who, want to put the information out there, they're only going to put the information out there that helps their narrative. And that's why I don't like all that stuff, because
I agree that there's a media narrative, and anytime you can use any story for the narrative, they try to make it work. I'm sure you saw that, or there was a 5-year-old kid that got murdered, was riding his bike. That was a big thing for a while.
yeah, the white kid, or the little white kid that got
an African
shot.
American. Right.
Yeah.
And they caught him in 24 hours. I'm glad justice is being served. It's a terrible situation. And I'll say this: if the roles were reversed, and if it happened to unfortunately be an African American kid and a white guy that did it, it would have been a much bigger story nationally than it was the other way around. So
Yes.
I agree that certain stories. I mean, I've seen the media bias. It's certainly there.
Mm-hmm.
I see more and more as I get older, and as I mentioned, I'm an Andrew Yang fan, and I could go on for hours about that because I saw firsthand.
We will in another episode, because we've deviated too much.
But that was very apparent. When here's a guy that's blowing up, and he's the first Asian American man to ever run as a Democrat, and no one knew him a year ago, and they're not even covering him, and they're leaving his name off of graphics, and there's a lot. It's very detailed too. There's people that have documented all of it.
Yeah,
but,
and
but I see there's a narrative, and a lot of it comes down from the network execs, and it gets worse and worse. It's really hard to watch the news these days. Any of them. MSNBC is blocked in my house. I have
the one thing that people don't realize, probably because they don't really think that far enough ahead to do this. The one thing that people don't realize, with CNN, is right now CNN is run by a guy named Jeff Zucker.
Yep.
Jeff Zucker is a reality TV guy. He was a reality TV guy before he got into the news world. And the reason that CNN has become the Orange Man Bad Network is because Jeff Zucker knows Donald Trump personally, because Jeff Zucker was the one that developed the show The Apprentice. So he knows how much money Donald Trump's name can bring in. That's why he has CNN talking about it so much.
Well, there's a
And
reason. There's a reason that during 2016 they would show empty Donald Trump podiums while Hillary or Bernie were speaking live somewhere else because it was all about ratings. I wonder if a certain degree of CNN, they almost, I don't want to say felt bad, but they wonder if, did we give him so much free advertising that we helped him get elected, and then they felt like they had to
well,
control it or to try to.
there is that
There's a
argument,
fine line
but
between holding a president accountable, especially as a news person, because as a journalist, you should not always be giving personal opinions. You should be asking well informed enough questions that the viewer can determine what's right and wrong based on the answer the person gives, and not you saying, "Oh, they just said this. This means this, this, and this." You
the
should be
problem,
telling us what the person meant when they said it. Let us hear it, and we can determine ourselves. So
right?
I think they went too far into trying to, trying to, you know, play trying to fact check him and trying to. I feel like they know they messed up and they were trying to go back on it.
The thing is, they weren't trying to fact check him. It's a game of gotcha. They're asking him things in ways that they know that they're trying to trip him up. But I agree that they were focusing more on him when they should have been focusing more on other people. So you get somebody like Zucker who knows how valuable Donald Trump is, and something it was a video that I was watching yesterday. Obviously, I don't know if we learned about. I think we might have learned about this in school. You know what the Nielsen ratings are, right, for TV?
Yeah, for television. Yep.
Yep. The Nielsen ratings typically only dealt with like TV shows and documentaries and this, that, and the other. And I don't remember what the video said specifically, but it said that at some point the news media realized that they were going. Oh, okay. I remember what it was. They were talking about TV shows and their ratings, and they were wondering about the target demographic or the main demographic or whatever. And there was a switch in the news media where the news media started focusing on the key demo or the key demographic. And it's like, you're not a TV show, you're not a reality show. You should not focus on a key demo. You should focus on the stories you're telling. And the reason that they're the reason that they're putting stories together the way they are is because they know that it'll get ratings. That's the problem with the news right now. They're not telling you the news to tell you the news. They're telling you the news to get eyes on their channel.
Yeah,
and
they want you to stay hooked 24 hours a day.
Yes, and actually, there's a guy named Brian Stelter who
I'm
works.
aware. Yeah,
he works for CNN, and
reliable sources of the show.
Yeah, he has actually said, and I've heard him say this, so I know it's true. He has actually said, when you want news, don't go to the other guys, come to us. And there's a guy that I follow on YouTube named Tim Pool, and Tim always says, don't just listen to me, listen to the other guys and see what matches up and see what you can prove. And when you've got somebody like Brian Stelter saying, don't listen to the other guys, just listen to us, that shows you just how dishonest the media is.
Yeah, I've caught his show. It's been a while. I thought he was a reasonable guy. I haven't checked his show out in a long time, but I would certainly hope, especially this day and age, that people are looking for more than one source for news. I would certainly hope people are cross-referencing and saying, okay, this side, the lefty media is saying this, so I'm going to see what the righty media is saying to try to inform an opinion. I certainly do.
I think
I
you
just
have
want
to
to know what's going on out there. I have no loyalty to any political party or person. I just want to feel like I have an understanding of what's going on in the world. And these days, I feel like it's even more important to really try to understand what's going on.
and I don't disagree with that, but I think you have too much faith in people. I don't think people have the willingness right now to do their own research like you and I. And I think that's why you and I are able to have such a, a constructive conversation. I think that's why you and I are able to interact in the way we do, because we're willing to do our own research. We're willing to look into things to, when something seems a little hinky, we're willing to go that extra step, because I think people who have grown up in the information age are they're spoiled. You and I didn't grow up in the information age. I mean, we had the internet in high school, but we didn't really have the information age until after we were both out of school.
Well, that's a big difference between remembering getting your first computer and versus growing up always having a smartphone or always having a computer already in the house.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a who knows. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to predict anything, but we're going to see. I mean, this is now the generation that's coming up that are the smartphone generation that always the ones that could Google anything at any time their whole lives, and that's all they've ever known. That they can at any point they can just Google it and they'll find an answer. That's good to a degree, but it's also harder. I remember Barack Obama said years ago, it's when you see two things side by side on the internet, sometimes it's tough to determine, what's steeped in research and what isn't. You always got to look for sources in peer review studies. I mean, are huge. Just the process that some of the organizations go through. So I get that the media's got bias, but there are certain platforms that I think are trying to do good, and especially research papers and things like that, and medical research, and like say what you want about climate change, whether or not it's man-made or how much of an effect we have on it. To determine these climate scientists, the research and discussions they have, the peer review process is so extreme and is so detailed that you have literally hundreds of scientists from around the world that are able to question you, do the research, edit things, and put it back. Then, after all this goes on, then they come out, okay, we believe that humans cause climate change to this degree. If you can do that, peer review studies is great. That's why it's nice to have a back and forth with people. It keeps you on your toes. You test your theories and get information that you maybe didn't get before. There's nothing wrong with, I keep bringing up Yang. He had a great statement. There's nothing wrong with changing one's mind. If you see new information or new details that you didn't have before, and then you change your mind, that's a good thing. What's bad is if you have a certain idea of, or an opinion of something, and then you use information that proves you're wrong, and you still stick with your original thought, you're just an asshole. You're helping nothing.
That's the problem. That's the problem with a lot of people right now, though, is there are blatant and obvious, uh, you know, things out there that prove that the media covers Trump inaccurately. But when you go and talk to somebody who is staunchly anti-Trump, and you try and tell them and show them, they get aggressive towards you. Like, I posted something earlier on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it. Um, it was a TikTok video that I saw, and they were filming the TV, and it was Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about something that CNN had done. Obviously, Tucker Carlson is Fox News, but he was talking about something that CNN had done. And what CNN did is, when they were talking about I think it was the thing that happened in Wisconsin. They were talking about the protests that were happening in Wisconsin, and on the moving chyron, I guess they call it, um, they actually had it phrased as violent protests, and it was literally there for 3 seconds before you saw them live edit it, and then it came back on and it said protests. They took out the word violent live on TV, and that's what I don't like about the media, is they are actively gaslighting people, and people aren't willing to acknowledge it. And the thing that I posted on when I posted that TikTok video on Facebook, and I shared it on there, A couple of months ago, a friend that I usually do my podcast with actually accused me of gaslighting him because I was trying to get him to look at a piece of information regarding a subject we were talking about, and he refused to do it. And he just wanted to believe what he was reading. And I'm like, dude, there's proof that what you're reading is wrong, and he didn't want to believe it, and he accused me of gaslighting him. And while I knew that I wasn't gaslighting him, that's going to stick with me because I don't gaslight anybody. I don't have the ability to gaslight anybody because if I'm lying to somebody, they're going to know it because it's on my face. I don't have the ability to lie to people. I just don't. But being accused of gaslighting somebody, that's going to stick with you when somebody accuses you of that. But when you're not willing to admit that the media gaslights people, there's something wrong with you. And
It,
when he blatantly denied that the media was the one gaslighting him, it broke me. Like, dude, what universe are you living in?
yeah. Well, it's hard to gaslight people on the internet because you can just do your own research, you know. So anyone that like for him to accuse you of gaslighting him online seems
He was
kind of
the reason that he was accused. The reason that he was accusing me of gaslighting him was because he wasn't willing to do his own research. Like, he was willing to do his own research to the point where he was referring to sources that he trusted, and the sources that he trusted were the ones that were gaslighting him.
well, it's easy to feel offended these days. I think some people like to pretend to feel offended. It's nice to pretend to feel offended because you can
You ain't
just.
kidding.
Uh, but the difference between fake news and media bias or media spin, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think CNN is fabricating stories of Donald Trump out of thin air, but they certainly choose to only report the negative aspects to any Trump. Uh, you know, and you do see to I forget who it was. Mike Pence was given a medal to a military vet. I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember the medal. I can't remember the vet's name or the situation, but I remembered hearing that it was happening. So I'm putting on the news, and CNN is covering something else, and then MSNBC is covering something else, and I go to Fox News, and Fox News is showing the Vice President of the United States awarding a medal to a military vet. Now, regardless of how you feel about Mike Pence or Donald Trump, that's a beautiful thing, and
Yeah.
you'd think it would be newsworthy that instead CNN was just covering the same story that's been breaking news for 10 straight hours or whatever. You know, Wolf Blitz, every single Wolf Blitzer show has started with breaking news. I don't remember. I mean, I don't watch a show that often, but whenever it comes on, it's always breaking news. They want to keep you glued to the TV. They only report the negatives about Trump. Now, I'm not a fan of the guy for many reasons, um, but it's just like the things they nitpick him for are so insignificant. Is because they have to. It's a Trump bashing network. MSNBC is the worst. They got that Lawrence O'Donnell show. It's a 59-minute Trump bashing show.
2 words:
I don't like the
Rachel
guy.
Maddow.
She come up with a lot of good points. See, what killed me with MSNBC was I used to watch it quite a bit, and during when the Mueller report was coming out and all of that, I was glued
That,
to the TV.
but when the
They're
Mueller,
telling me today now Trump's going to be hauled out in handcuffs, and I'm okay. I'm waiting for you. You bringing on these federal prosecutors and lawyers and judges and attorneys saying, "Oh, we know he did this," and then nothing happened. And then it killed me, you know. And now, first off, the Mueller report's a whole nother topic. We could go on that for a long time too, but
yeah,
it
we
was
we need
around the same time. It
we're
was
we're
around the.
devi- we're deviating away
We
from
are
music.
deviating. I'll just say it's easy to see the media bias. I don't think they're fabricating stories out of thin air, but they certainly have an agenda on what they choose to report and from what lens.
It, they're not. I don't know that they're fabricating them, but if you look at when a fact checking organization fact checks something, um, Tim Pool, the guy that I watch on YouTube all the time, he gives a good example. He'll say, you know, somebody could report Donald Trump did a backflip while eating ice cream, and a fact checking organization will come along and say uh, mostly false. Donald Trump did do a backflip, but he was not eating chocolate ice cream. So they operate in half truths.
I've
And
noticed that with some of the fact checks are like that, mostly false versus and some of them are kind of
they add things in so that they can make him look bad, which pisses me off. But one of the things to go back onto the music aspect of it, but to still stick with what we're talking about, um, early in these first 4 years, Trump was talking about the fact that California had said that it wanted to declare itself a sanctuary state for illegal immigrants. And um, when Donald Trump wanted to call their bluff, basically. And what he said was that he was going to make, or if they want to become a sanctuary state, then any person illegally in the country, they were going to send them to California.
I
At the
remember.
at the same time, Cher, you know, the one that is going to be around after the nuclear apocalypse, because she won't die. Um, she actually put out a tweet that said, "I'm willing to take in any immigrant that is misplaced." And as soon as Donald Trump said, "We are actively looking at options to send these illegal immigrants to California," Cher got back on Twitter and said, "Don't send them here. We already have enough problems with our own residents being homeless. We need to take care of that first." That's what pisses me off. It's like I don't like all this virtue signaling crap. So that's why I was talking about bias in the music and entertainment industry, because you have these people that are telling you to do one thing, but their actions are counter to what they're telling you. It's like when you and I were growing up, we always saw those commercials for like the ASPCA. So, or I'll just throw that out there. When you have a celebrity on a commercial for the ASPCA, like Sarah McLachlan or Alyssa Milano, and you have these multimillionaires, telling an everyday Joe like you and me to donate money, it's like you're getting paid to make that commercial. Why don't you donate money? That's what I don't like, and that's where the hypocrisy comes in, because they're not doing things for the better of humanity or the betterment of these organizations. They're doing it for the betterment of their own personal interests.
Yeah, I can see that in a lot of cases. People just trying to line their own pockets or make themselves up to be these great humanitarians for whatever reason or other. I'd like to think a lot of people that speak out, though, are doing so because they feel like they have a platform and they might be able to make a difference and maybe they can help some people out. If that is their intention, then I support it. Um, what I find funny these days is, though, it's like all of these older Pink Floyd fans that are telling Roger Waters, just go back to playing music and stop talking about politics. It's like, have you listened to any Pink Floyd songs? Like, are you aware of what he stands for the last 40 years, 50 years? A lot of people like that. Someone said the same thing about someone called out Tom Morello on Twitter about I forget the topic. It was like, oh, just stick to music. And Tom Morello said, well, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know, but I am a rock. He's a Harvard graduate, I believe, or a
Have
Yale
you
graduate. He's got a
speaking
degree, so
speaking of political bans, I actually have this in my notes to talk about. Are you familiar with the Serge Tankian interview from System of a Down?
I feel like I saw something. I don't know any details of the interview, but I just saw it's been going around as a thing. I'm not sure.
What happened was Serge was being interviewed independently without the rest of the band, and he started talking a lot of shit about John Domayan, their drummer. And he said, "I don't understand how somebody can have the political views that John has and still be able to play some of the songs that we have." And he goes, it seems just grossly hypocritical. And it's like, you can be in a band with other people and have different views. That's how a variety of music comes out of one band. And it disgusted me that he attacked one of his bandmates without his bandmate being there to defend himself. And you know how political candidates will at their rallies, they'll use certain music to kind of amp up the crowd. Um, this kind of bothered me in a sense because I don't think it was necessary to get political. I guess Trump used a campaign video that a fan had made, but he used a Linkin Park song behind it, and Mike from Linkin Park actually sent his team a cease and desist. And uh, I agree with that to a certain extent. Like, that's fine because obviously Trump didn't get, permission from the band to use it. But what Mike said after sending the cease and desist was what really bothered me because he made this specific statement: "We have never and will never support Donald Trump." And it's like, you have to be careful when you're an entertainer and you have such a wide fan base because you may have fans that are Donald Trump supporters. And by making that blanket statement, you may be alienating some of your supporters.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, Trump supporters buy albums too.
Yeah.
One of there's a good friend of mine is a Deadhead, a big Grateful Dead fan, and a Donald Trump supporter. I always thought that was kind of contradictory things, but there's a lot of people that like the Grateful Dead that like Donald Trump, which just shows you're not boxed into ideologies or anything. It's you can have an open mind. You can have opinions on things and support other things. There's a lot of, I mean, they're not, and also Linkin Park's not the only band to send a cease and desist to Trump. Tom
I
Petty
know.
sent a cease and desist to Rolling Stones, Neil Young. There's a
Uh,
lot of them. Many of them
D. Snyder
because of
from
their own
Twisted
stand.
Sister did.
Say it again.
D. Snyder from Twisted Sister back in 2016 sent one.
So I don't blame musicians for not wanting their songs at political
Oh, I
rallies
don't blame
because
him
they
either.
don't want to be associated.
I think it was the wrong message to send when Mike made that statement.
Yeah, it's one thing to say we don't want to get involved. We have a lot of fans that have different political opinions. We just don't want to be associated. That'd be the best way to do it.
Yeah,
But if you
because
saw like someone that is like a Neil Young fan, Neil Young will go out and say, "I don't like Trump. I don't want him using my stuff," and it's not going to hurt Neil Young that much. Although there are a ton of Trump supporting Neil Young fans out there. I
and
just
actually,
wish people would be okay to take a little abuse and let it go. Also, too, I mean, you're not. If I'm a Trump supporter and you don't like him, I don't care. You're not insulting me or my family by not liking Trump. I'm a big Andrew Yang fan. If you tell me you don't like Yang because of whatever this or that, I don't take personal offense to it. What does seem to be a big thing is there are a lot of Donald Trump supporters out there that take criticism of Trump as a personal insult on them. Like you're calling out their ideology, which I don't like to see. I love talking. I'll talk any topic with any person, anytime, anywhere, and I don't get offended by it. I mean, how can you be offended by an opinion a person has? And there's also a difference too between. I mean, in the days of cancel culture, everybody's so quick to try to cancel people. I think, and there may not be a difference, but I think there's a difference in someone pounding the table and waving a sign for their beliefs versus some guy. If you just found a guy walking on the streets and said, "Sir, what do you think about immigration?" and he answered a question, can you really be pissed at him for the answer he gives? I mean, you stuck a mic in his face and you asked him what his opinion was.
right.
There's a difference between giving an opinion and waving the flag for your opinion. But either way, there are a lot of passionate people on a lot of different topics. I have a huge number of Trump supporters in my family, and I hang out with all of them. I play cards with them. We go to concerts. We hang out in the backyard and drink and carry on. We've talked politics a lot. Sometimes it's gotten heated. Sometimes it's been good natured. But I have never once ever thought I'm not going to talk to that person again.
Yeah.
Alex Jones was big for a while, and as much as I thought the guy was bad, for a
Mhm.
lot of reasons in the things that he said. I never once thought the guy should be removed or canceled or never heard from again. I mean, if people, I was shocked when I heard how many people tuned into his show, but I never once ever thought, oh, he's a bad guy. You should cancel him and get rid of a show and take him off TV. I would never think of such a thing. It would never cross my mind.
Here's the thing, and it's funny you bring that up because I think I know that we're too young to remember when Howard Stern started out, but if you look at what we're dealing with today in respect to a figure like Alex Jones or even a figure like Donald Trump, people love to hate on those two individuals. And if you remember, I don't. There was a famous interview that somebody gave um, way back when Howard Stern was a controversial figure. Um, they said that people love to hate Howard Stern because they don't actually dislike him. What it really boils down to is they may say they hate him, but they tune in to see what they tune in to see what he's saying just so they can hate on him. So they're still giving him the views and the listenership, and they are basically advocating his lip service.
Yeah, well, this thing, a lot of hate watch is a new term
Yeah,
these days. So like, I mean, I caught a little bit of the RNC. I wasn't too happy with what I saw. I wasn't necessarily hate watching it, but I wanted to see what was going on, and I had a feeling I'd find a lot of things I disagreed with, so I watched a little bit of it. I don't know. You gotta, like you say, you gotta try to get information from a lot of different people. I think, especially this day and age. I like Howard Stern now. I've listened to him speak on a few things. He interviewed Hillary Clinton not long ago, and I actually thought it was a pretty good conversation. He went on Bill Maher's show, and that was a pretty good talk. Um, again, I don't take things personally at all. I never have really. I'm a pretty easygoing person, and I have a lot of friends with a lot of different beliefs. I like talking to them about things because I like to know where people come from, and I learn a lot from these people too. You
yeah.
know, I supported Bernie for a while before Yang, and I like what there's the statement, healthcare is a right. And I hear him like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for whatever reason. But I'll tell you what, it was Senator Rand Paul one day stopped me dead in tracks when he said, why do you have the right to another person's service? What gives you the right to what they have? And I thought about it for him like that. He stopped me dead in my tracks. I'm like, that's such a great argument. Here's a doctor that went to school their whole lives and earned a degree and starts to practice. Who am I to say you have to fix me? I'm going to come in right now and I'm not going to pay anything. You're going to take care of me. That seems like a ridiculous idea. So I learn a lot. I still think that there's obviously ways to make healthcare cheaper, and I think if you're talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and if you as a government expect your citizens to contribute in any meaningful way, health. I don't think anything should be given to people for free. But if you're going to give something away, healthcare is not a bad thing to give away. So
Um,
I try to look at things from different angles.
and it's funny that you bring up the healthcare angle. And I'm not saying that because the amount of schooling you have to go to or go through to become employed in the medical field is fucking
Oh,
astronomical.
and the amount of debt you have to take on, and the
But
work is.
here's the thing: there's a lot of monetary corruption in the medical industry, but people people that try to have discussions with me as far as medical or as far as the medical aspect tend to shy away from it. And I know you won't because um, you and I have known each other long enough where that obviously for obvious reasons the medical world is something that is very prominent with me for various reasons.
Yeah.
Um, I to a certain extent I think that the way that we curb the monetary issue with the medical industry is we make it nonprofit. We we make it so that the services are paid for, and the people providing those services are paid, but they're not paid, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars. But I think the problem that we're looking at isn't necessarily the ones that are administering the care. I think the problem is the ones who develop the drugs and develop the durable medical equipment that is necessary. I think that those are the ones that are profiting more than the actual ones administering the care. Because what we've seen since the start of COVID, I think that the people on the front lines who are administering the care, they're the ones that deserve the six-figure salaries.
True.
Like they're the ones that deserve to be very, very much compensated for the things that they do. The people that are making these drugs and making this durable medical equipment that's necessary, I agree that they should be compensated, but there is overcompensation, and I don't think that they need to be overcompensated.
Well, there is no, there's no pain, there's no structure or rhyme or reason or anything, any system in place to determine why they charge what they charge for medication. There's
Well,
one of these medications that we're funding with our tax dollars for COVID relief. And what I read, I can't remember the name of it. It it costs them about $1 per pill to make, and they're charging $2,500 a piece for the pills. Now,
well,
where is it? Well, how can you tell me that a 2,500% increase is necessary? Now, I know there's just like in colleges, there's a lot of administrative overhead. There's a lot of middlemen in there, and that they're costing us more money in medical cost and in school. Two things that seem to keep getting more expensive is healthcare and cost of school. The costs never go down; they always go up. And there's so many hands in the pot that if somebody smart enough could go in and just clean house, I think a lot of things would run more effective.
if you you probably know about this story, but you probably forgot about it. If you get a chance, look up Pharma Bro. I don't remember
Scarelli.
Skrelly. Yeah, Martin
All
Skrelly.
I remember him is buying the Wu Tang album. That son of a bitch.
What he did is um, he bought, I guess, the rights to an HIV drug, and he jacked it up something like 3,500%.
Because he could. Because there's no regulation that's saying he can't.
Right. Um, I do think that the corruption and the regulation need to be dealt with, but at the same time, with the precision and care that um, these procedures and treatments need to be carried out, I do think that people who go to school to learn how to use these technologies and these medications, I do think that they deserve to be very well compensated.
Yeah.
I do agree that it takes some very dedicated scientists to develop these drugs and this durable medical equipment. So they should be compensated. But I think that we are we're overfunding the individuals where we should be overfunding the the studies or the development of the drugs and the durable medical equipment. So I think that it just needs to be refocused. I think there needs to be a different focus.
You need people, needs an outsider to come in and make decisions on a lot of these things. I mean, obviously, people need to be compensated for your hard work. That's the whole free market. That's what the country's founded on. I don't think I support Bernie. I'm no socialist. I don't think everything should be nationalized, but there has to be government regulation in certain aspects. I mean, I'm all for government, but the whole point, the government should be simply to protect consumers. If you want us to keep this free market going and keep consuming, we need to be protected from certain competitive. I mean, were on the same age. You probably read Upton Sinclair in school, The Jungle. I mean, thank God some investigative journalists are investigating the poor conditions in those meatpacking facilities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People are dying and getting sick all the time. That's a situation where government intervention is necessary. You can come in and say, if you're gonna, you got to take care of your employees to a degree. You can't expose people to these working conditions, and especially after the Industrial Revolution, when machine operation was so huge. And I mean, that's where all these socialist revolutions come from. Karl Marx and all that is all taking care of workers to a degree. And I mean, they broke apart with the Bolshevik Revolution and all that. That's a whole nother discussion. But it, the government has to be there to protect the consumers to a degree. Now they shouldn't have their nose in everything, but if the consumers are being taken advantage of, the government should step in and make things right. That's why
Yeah.
the Nordic model is such a it's government interventionism. It's let the free market do its thing until there's some inaccuracies and some
And
things that are not
this
there. Then the government can come in and say, okay, you can't do this. Let's do this. But it's tough to have these conversations these days because anytime you mention the word regulation at all, people, oh, socialist, you commie, you hate
well,
America.
the the thing that cracks me up about the Nordic model is how much Bernie Sanders gets dragged every time that man says we need to be more like Denmark, and he equates Denmark with being socialist. And the guy that runs Denmark says, "Dude, we're not socialist. Shut up."
Well, that's a tough comment. I feel like when people everyone's using the word socialism differently to fit the point they're trying to make. I always thought Bernie would. I don't like that he's a self-described democratic socialist. I think he would not have a choice but to act as more of a social democrat within our system. I feel like we are such an over-the-top capitalistic system, and because we abide by the Constitution, I think those things would keep Bernie in a specific lane. And I think even if he wanted to have a violent communist revolution, I don't see it happening. I feel like I trust the institutions enough to where that wouldn't be allowed. Now, who knows what Bernie would further down the road? Because I mean, socialism was always meant as a stopgap or as a transition to communism. I support the free market, obviously, but the government has to be there to a degree to protect us. And healthcare is one aspect of it. Free and fair elections and safe working conditions. And again, no one socialism stuff to talk about these days because everybody has a different meaning of it. And the socialist parties are more prominent in the country now. I don't even know how to talk to the younger generation these days and what they mean. And leftists,
Yeah.
now being a liberal is a bad thing. Now being a liberal is too center. Now you have to be an ultra leftist. But even when you look at some of these things, though, that the self-described leftists are looking for, they're not that crazy ideas. I mean, free college is not an answer necessarily. With only a fine percentage of people that actually go to college, basically you would be subsidizing college for people that were going to go already.
Yeah.
Uh, we need to look more into trade schools and things like. I think in Germany, the percentage of high school graduates that go into trade schools in the United States is something like 9%, and in Germany it's like 56%.
Yeah.
College is not the end all be all, and it's harder these days. I mean, I'm not a college graduate, but from what I read, it's hard to get a job using the degree that you attained. A lot of college graduates accept jobs that have nothing to do with what their degree is.
And the problem is when you and I were growing up, our parents said that, oh, you need to go to college and get further education so that you can get a better job. And if you remember, when as kids, when we would search for jobs, we would see a lot of jobs in the wanted section that said some college required. The problem is now it got to a point where if you have a college degree, they don't hire you anymore because they would have to actually pay you what you're worth, and they don't want to do that anymore. So college works completely against you now.
It's tough, and with the job market, and again, as a young person, automation and AI is getting crazy.
Yeah,
A lot of these jobs that are lost in the pandemic aren't coming back because AI and automation is increasing.
yeah,
You're going to see it in fast food and call centers. It's going to spread, and even some white collar jobs. There's talks about there's artificial intelligence now that can detect shades of gray that the human eye can't. So in like radiology and things like that, I've heard that there are doctors fleeing are fleeing radiology because they think the technology for AI is going to be so good that it's going to take their work. There's a lot of back office clerical work that's going to be
Yeah.
automated away. So it's a crazy time. I feel like everything's being accelerated during the COVID. Um, and you see people losing their jobs and health insurance, and that's another thing too. As another Andrew Yang idea was a pro business idea is by promoting a universal health care or something like it, you're getting the cost of health insurance off the backs of business owners. How expensive is it for business owners to operate when you have to provide insurance based on how many employees you have? If business
Correct.
owners did not have to provide insurance, they could pay you more, they'd be more profitable. And it's also better for the person when if you lose your job or fired or get fired or quit or something happens, you shouldn't also lose your insurance. If you want to move, your insurance shouldn't. The fact that insurance is tied to employment is crazy. It's a crazy concept to me.
Yeah. Um, kind of, I want to tie everything in because there's still something that we haven't really talked about as far as kind of a last kind of thought thing. When it comes to making sure your actions match up to your objective, um, you and I were talking about the unfortunate, not destruction, but the vandalization of the Chris Cornell statue.
Yeah.
When you have people who are listening to the wrong people about what is actually going on, they are acting in such a way that is completely counter to what they hope to achieve, like the objective they hope to achieve. So, as far as people just going out there and just creating chaos for the sake of creating chaos and no longer actually having a unified objective, um, what's your perspective on that, and how do we essentially, within the context of this series of trying to figure out how we can use music and art to kind of bring people back to the center so that we're all talking amongst each other and figuring things out. What are your thoughts on how we can better educate each other, but also be willing to educate ourselves? Because the the vandalism of the Chris Cornell statue did not need to happen.
No. Well, there's a lot to say there. It's it's not always easy to see the results of your actions. To see what the blowback is going to be further downstream based on what you believe and what you do. Sometimes you don't care if it's in a lot of these cases in these protests. You don't care what you're pissed. You're pissed off, and you want to make it known that you're pissed off. So that's why a lot of people do it. You like to think that we're more similar than we are different humans. But sometimes music can highlight the different. I mean, people have different tastes in music. As much as you'd like to think music is something that can be, an equalizer and a mediator in a way to see similarities in each other. Sometimes it doesn't, but there's not too much hatred. If you really hate music or hate a song or hate, you got problems. I mean,
Yeah.
you did not like something, but if you physically hate, a style of music or art, you're not doing it right. You're missing the whole point. So, as far as the Chris Cornell statue, we also have to be careful in who we're blaming or who we perceive is doing these things. I remember a kid, you know, with a marker writing on stuff on the playground as a kid. A lot, not so much in the statue necessarily, but you see all the time. Oh, someone went in the graveyard and kicked over a bunch of gravestones and painted a bunch of swastikas on Jewish cemeteries and stuff. It's like, who would do such a thing? Probably a 14 or 15-year-old kid that has no idea they're doing it just to be an asshole. I highly doubt those 30-year-olds going to the cemeteries and kicking over gravestones. They're working, they're a little busy, they got to work the next day. So a lot of people attribute certain negative things that happen in our culture to, oh, it's a sign of the times, and Well, the world's going to the dogs. Well, it was probably just a bunch of kids that did something fucking stupid, and don't read too much into it. In 10 years, they're going to look back and say, what an idiot I was. We all have done stupid shit. Now, as far as the Cornell statue, I don't know. Maybe, who knows if the people doing it can distinguish between, oh, this is Chris Cornell. He was the first man in a white man versus, oh, this is a statue of Robert E. Lee, who was it, sometimes you see a statue and you're like, oh, I'm going to cause destruction. We're out here because this is what we're doing. We're throwing some paint on the statue, whatever. I told you in Texas, they spray painted BLM on a Stevie Ray Vaughan statue in Vermont, in Texas. And it's like, they didn't even know it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. Some people attribute it to, he's a white man, the black man's blues. What's the word I'm trying to, when you appropriate? It's a white man trying to appropriate black culture, I don't look at it like that. And if that was a reason they did desecrate the Steve Ray Vaughan statue, who's one of my all-time favorite musicians, I will go to, I'm going to butcher it, but B.B. King had a statement about Steve Ray Vaughan where he said, I always thought that to play the blues, you got to be black. And he may not have said you got to be black, but you gotta know hard times. You got to really feel the blues. You got to have that in your soul. You got to be. He goes, I never noticed any. He goes, Stevie Ray Vaughan was a blues musician, and I never noticed any of that stuff. It's his way of saying Stevie Ray Vaughan rises above all of that. He wasn't a black guy. He didn't have the same background that B.B. King knew, but he said he was so good at what he did, I never noticed. I never cared. But music can transcend a lot of this shit. And a lot of the blues musicians, especially the Rolling Stones, deserve a lot of credit for giving Howlin' Wolf a platform and giving a lot of these blues guys that the white people in this country wrote off for years. For whatever reason, it just wasn't their style of music or whatever. I don't want to blame people, but music can have a huge effect. But is it the end all be all, or can it turn the tides of the climate that's out there right now? I don't know. I think listening to more music and different kinds of music and talking to people about music is overtly a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And if people of different backgrounds and ages or religions or whatever are talking about shared interests in music, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it can do a lot of good. I'm worried out there given the political climate. A good bit of some of these protests seem to be more about controlling people than it is about the movement or trying to let people know that, hey, don't forget that Black Lives Matter too. And we have to say it every now and then, otherwise you forget. There is all lives should matter, but increasingly more and more it seems like you have to remind people that don't forget that, Black people matter too, and maybe you should focus on them for a period. But it's tough when people are trying to have constructive conversations. And then you do have things like, defacing statues and burning buildings down and stuff like that. I don't like seeing it, but again, it's tough. If you've been trying to make things work peacefully for years in this country or not peacefully and the same shit still keeps happening, I don't know. I can't say I wouldn't be out there in the streets, but I don't think I would be setting fires to police cars or anything. And it does hurt the cause in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I guess the question was about the Cornell statue. I don't know if that was a statement, if it was a Black Lives Matter statement, or if it was just kids making trouble in the streets. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do think, again, everyone should try to focus more on learning, hearing other sides, actually giving people you don't agree with the time of day to listen and maybe learn something. And it's easy to say. I don't know. The media doesn't help, and college campuses these days don't help, and the president's rhetoric doesn't always help. I wish he would do more to try to unite the country. Um, there's a lot of things that we can all do to help him. I just wish people would. I wish people would think twice before immersing themselves in the culture war and keep on. My newsfeed these days for people I know on Twitter too, but especially with people that I actually know on Facebook, it's everyone's trying to get in on the culture war. It's like, well, this is my opinion on what happened here and there, and it's like you can't let everything affect you and bother you all the time. You gotta let some shit go.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rambling, but I don't know.
No, it's fine. That's why I, appreciate being able to have conversations like this, because I know we definitely deviated quite a bit, and this is probably the longest episode I've done. But I think that the fact that, One other thing, I think structurally with the episodes that I've done previously, we've talked about how music can bring people together for the sake of having a conversation, whereas you and I actually were able to discuss certain issues that are impacting social and political society today. So I think that was actually extremely effective. Um, but it's just I I look at it and people. The one thing that always kind of confuses me is when you and I were in school and you, me, Russell, Terrell, and Dennis would all walk home. We all came from different backgrounds, but I don't think those backgrounds ever played a part in us interacting.
Of course not.
Like, you know, we would have the most random, sometimes deep, but mostly bullshit conversations just because we were teenagers. But I look at that and I look at what is being the types of statements that are being thrown around today. You are obviously an Italian, and if someone were to look at you, they would obviously say, well, you're not white, so to speak, um, because you have Italian descent. Somebody would look at me and they, without even talking to me, they would say, oh, it's a guy in a wheelchair. He's part of a protected class and no one should challenge his ideas. But as soon as they hear me having a conversation with somebody and they hear that I have different ideas than them, I'm automatically all of these just nasty descriptive words, and they haven't even had an actual discussion with me yet. So that's what I don't get, because you and I can have differences of opinion and we can discuss them without using immutable characteristics about each other to bring each other down. We're more interested in each other, or in understanding why each other thinks the way we do, rather than trying to get the other person to think the same way we do. And that's what always confuses me about the social time that we're in right now, is I wish people were more concerned with understanding each other versus accepting each other. Because actually the second episode I had of this series, I was talking to my friend Melissa, who is a trans woman, and I asked her, being a part of the LGBT community, what is more important to you, being understood or being accepted? And she instantly said being understood. She goes, I don't care if you accept me. I just hope that you'll understand me. And I love that. Like, that is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I can see that. The word tolerance, is a big word. You should tolerate people even if you don't agree with their opinions on things. It helps where we grew up that we did, you, me, and Terrell and Dennis and Russell. We were all different people, and it's when you know more diverse people, and when you grow up around more diverse people, it totally influences your outlook on life. You're more understanding. You can accept things more easily and see other people's point of view. That's why I am hopeful for the future in that we are becoming a more diverse society every day. That's got to be a good thing. I think if you're exposed to different ideas and beliefs and conversations with people, it can't be bad. So I feel like every generation is less and less bigoted. Every generation is less hateful. I like to think it may not look like it some days out there today, but you know, uh,
It's to put it into context. Like, when we were growing up, um, South Park had just become big, and I look at what was it? Yeah, there's five of us that used to walk home together. I look at the five of us, and we're basically like the guys from South Park. Like, I would say that Dennis was Kenny, because he
he
was
didn't
always
talk much.
yeah, he was always the quiet one, and he responded when spoken to. Um, I would say, as far as being kind of mouthy, I would say that Terrell was Cartman, because he was the more outspoken one. Um, are there only four? I thought there were five guys in the South Park crew.
Just the four. Then he had add-ons like Butters and some of these other characters, but it was just Cartman, Kenny, and
Because I'm trying to figure
Andy
out
Carl.
where me, and Russell would fit in. Like I'm trying to figure out what character we would be attributed to. I would say I would be more the Stan or Kyle.
I'd like to think I'm somewhere in between, because I can be a mouthy prick too, but I give a shit about some things. So
Yeah.
Kyle always had that caring side to him a little bit. So I think I'm kind of in between somewhere. But well, it's amazing that show's still running. I think we talked about that the other day. Still pretty relevant after all these years. It's
I love the fact that
96 or
it's still
97 it
relevant.
came out, I think.
Yes. It came out in it had to have come out in '96 because I think it was just as I entered middle school that it came
I
out.
remember I remember when it first came out, I was not allowed to watch the show. I was like 10, I think, at the time. I wasn't allowed to watch it.
The guy that my mom was married to, she wasn't married to him at the time, but we were living with him. When the show started, he would watch it, and I would sit in the living room and watch it with him, even though she didn't want me to. But I think that is what kind of shaped our generation, the majority of our generation. That's why we're able to look at things objectively for the most part. And that's why we're able to have some healthy level of cynicism.
Yeah, you have to be able to be offended. Like you say, you can't be afraid to be offended and talking with other people or whatever it may be. I feel like, I mean, don't raise young kids, but I feel like some of these younger generations are, you know, they are they don't have that confrontation always growing up. You need confrontation a little bit. I'm not saying you need a fist fight with people, but you got to have some pushback. I grew up with with lots of cousins, and we grew up playing sports and arguing with each other, and making fun of each other, and just we would for hours just go back and forth, calling each other names and making fun of the way the other person looked or whatever. It's part of growing up. Everyone needs to be, you know, to be exposed to criticism.
Yeah.
Uh, before you become an adult, because then you can't handle it too well, or before you hit a certain age in youth, and I don't know, it becomes harder to be a person in the real world out there if you don't have an idea on how things really should work. And like I say, I have hope in a lot of ways in the future, but there's a lot of things that I just shake my head like I don't want to know what it's going to be like in 10 or 15 or 20 years.
As a last thought, because I want to give you kind of the last word before we sign off here, because we've been on for 2.5 hours now. Um, as far as interacting with other people and, just kind of always being around people that were different from you, that would challenge your view of the world and teach you. What is the best bit of advice that you can remember that your mom or dad gave you growing up?
Uh, let's see. Boy, it's tough. My parents taught me a lot of stuff. My dad, especially. I don't know any specific. I'd have to think about that a minute. He never liked braggarts. He never liked loudmouths. He always liked humble people, which has to this day is a big part of who I am. I never liked loudmouths and braggarts. It's one reason why, and I don't want to go back into deviate too far, but I couldn't get behind Trump. He seems like everything I am the total opposite of everything Donald Trump stands for. I mean everything. Family service, my father was an army vet. Uh, I look at the world through a certain lens, and my parents obviously dictated a big part of that. My dad especially. Uh, the value of hard work. Once I think once in my life I ever saw my dad call in sick to work, and it was because he hurt his back helping his friend move and could barely walk. He, so there's the way you are a product of your environment to a large degree, and my environment was hardworking, honest, humble people. So for me, that's how I look at the world. I make jokes. I'm not a, it's hard to know how people take you. I
Yeah.
say a lot of things and I run my mouth quite a bit, and I hope people know that I'm kidding and I don't really think of myself as all that shit. 'Cause I'm a
Yeah.
pretty humble guy.
Yeah.
Um, but just the value of basically right and wrong, being honest and hardworking and humble. I think that it just goes a long way in life. I think the world could use a bit more of that.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. I think the next, I definitely want to do another podcast episode with you. Maybe not for this series, but separately. The series that we were talking about off stream, that Oliver Stone narrates on Netflix. I think I want both of us to watch that series and then come back and do like a discussion about it and an analysis. I think that would be really cool.
Sure, yeah. Like I said, I caught a couple episodes and it's pretty interesting stuff. And yeah, I checked it out.
Yeah, so we'll watch it, we'll take notes, and we'll come back maybe in about a week, and we'll do like a separate episode from this series.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, man. Thank you. See you
Bye.